Okay. See, the solution is to open the game and get OBS to capture it first, because it's kind of janky, clearly. Thank goodness this wasn't one of those ones that I can't open. Got up this morning, my right ear was kind of clogged with earwax. Had to like deal with that for a little while. Woke up, had my coffee. Seems like if I don't have breakfast right away, it's a good thing for me. Because for the past week or so, I've been getting up, having coffee and like a light breakfast. I get sleepy and I have to go back and lay down for a couple hours, but apparently just doing the coffee and delaying the breakfast is good. I feel fine right now. I feel great. Human body's a weird thing. I'm still getting used to piloting it after all these years. Hey, Gex. Yeah, it's a good time because the first murders happened yesterday, so now people are gonna talk about it, kind of. This is kind of where a lot of stuff starts to change. 6 people died yesterday, all at once. All that could be heard was the sound of the rain, the voices from the kids' TV program Mario was watching, and the engrossed Mario's cackling voice. In other words, what greeted them as they returned dumbfounded from that horrible, bizarre scene was the voice of Mario as she rolled around laughing at the TV. Her mom's dead, by the way. Those who returned to the room didn't know how to explain to Mario that her mother was dead, and were trapped by a suffocating silence. At first, Mario returned their stares with a dubious look, but when she realized they weren't trying to blame her for anything, she ignored them and again immersed herself in the TV program. Poor Mario. The children wordlessly sat down heavily on the sofa. Their minds were probably blank from their state of shock. Just to recap here, Battler, our protagonist, has lost both his parents, his dad and his mother-in-law. Jessica has lost her dad. George lost the girl he just proposed to yesterday that accepted. Mario lost her mother, and we also lost this servant that no one gives a shit about. He's kind of an asshole. Hey, real. So, we lost 5 people that matter there. Only Conan had returned to his usual calm expression. Oh, and the servant, like, that George was engaged to, was basically his sister. They grew up in the same orphanage. So, he's a little bit sad, too. However, that probably didn't mean he'd been able to wipe out the shock. Nothing was reflected in his eyes as he stared into empty space. Hideyoshi kept on fidgeting, and every time he remembered that horrible scene, he started muttering about how he couldn't believe it, how it couldn't have been something from this world, how it must have been the work of demons. Every now and then, his mutterings produced a question directed at Nanjo, but the latter kept repeating in a calm, doctor-like manner that nothing could be understood by only glancing at the scene, and that until the police arrived, they wouldn't learn anything. Nanjo is not experienced in, like, examining bodies, but he did the job anyway. He's just a general practitioner. However, Nanjo only appeared calm next to Hideyoshi, who simply couldn't suppress his agitation and fear. In fact, Nanjo had also received a huge shock, and his face was a deathly pale. Maybe that atmosphere was why she tried to rise to the challenge and take charge. Natsuhi lost her husband. Natsuhi appeared to be unchanged from her normal attitude, and she briskly gave directions. I will go see father. Genji, quickly contact the police. Certainly. I wonder if you would allow me to tag along, Natsuhine-san. Since Kraus-Nisan is now gone, the task of guiding father has been left to me. It would be improper of me to relax here while relying entirely on you. Natsu was struck speechless by Ava's aggressive move in a situation like this. He seemed to have been claiming that, with Kraus dead, the one to take responsibility shouldn't be his wife, but herself that is highly ranked in the family. Yeah, the only, like, out of the 4 siblings, the only branch to not directly lose anyone was Eva and Hideyoshi's, because they lost George's, fiancé. Not like they were even really aware of that until now. But essentially, they're looking to be the best right now. They're best off. Or maybe she hadn't been at all happy when Natsui took command without reference to her in such an extreme situation. However, even Eva's mind had been blank from shock until a moment ago. She only came to her senses after Natsui started giving orders. She's one of the ones who I don't think she's seen the bodies. She was lucky, I believe, unless they called her over after. Oh, no, she was there. Just do as you like. Natsui started walking away, walking without saying a word more. Eva followed behind her. As they did, Kumasawa ran into the parlor. She usually wasn't the kind of person to run around, so under normal circumstances, most people would have taken her entrance as a sign that something was the matter. But because everyone was still stricken with shock, they hardly even noticed her. Madam. If you're looking for Natsuine-san, she went to see father. She'll probably be back soon. What happened, Kumasawa-san? You see, in the dining hall, there was blood. Blood? The ears of everyone in the parlor twitched. Everyone thought the same thing. I hope I misheard that. Any container can only hold so much, and no one here would be capable of handling yet another tragedy. So they all thought it. I hope I misheard that. What happened? In the dining hall. When I went to the dining hall, to set up for breakfast. The first one to start running was George. His harsh footsteps jogged Hideyoshi and Nanja to their senses, and they chased after him. Battler and the others followed. They flew into the dining hall one after another, but they didn't find any change that might have caused Kumasawa to go pale. To those who had viewed that gruesome scene in the storehouse, it was a bit of an anticlimax. However, Kumasawa, who had followed them, pointed it out. There really were some traces of blood remaining on the floor. Compared to that terrible scene, it wasn't very impressive. However, if you calmly thought about it, this definitely indicated the loss of a lot of blood. There's another puddle of blood over here. What in the world? It appears that a great deal of time has passed. It's probably safe to say that they were killed here last night. It definitely looks that way. We were talking together in the dining hall until late into the night. After that, someone must have forced their way in. Dad, when did you and Mom slip out of the meeting and go to sleep? It was a little past midnight, so you should probably assume it happened after that. Are you kidding me? Give me a break. My lady, please, stay strong. After seeing that hell on earth in the storehouse, this is nothing. Really? Good for you. I feel like my head's gonna explode. This is the dining hall, right? Every day this is where I'd eat, complain about school, complain about homework, talk to my dad about my grades. That's what this place is to me. My lady, it wouldn't be good to remain here any longer. Let's return to the parlor. I agree. Uncle Hideyoshi, I think this room will be really important to the police. Don't you think it'd be bad if we trampled all over it? Edward proposed this in a slightly firm voice as, along with Cannon, he grabbed the pail and shaking Jessica's shoulders. Everything is just as Battler-san has said. There's nothing more to be gained from remaining in this room. I just spoke, looking at everyone's pale faces. Even though that horrible scene in the storehouse felt like something out of this world, at least then we'd been able to leave, to cut ourselves off from that place and run away. Everyone had shared in that feeling. However, this dining hall was different. It was in the mansion, the main building on this estate. And as Jessica had said, it should have been one of the most calming places even inside the mansion. It was where all the relatives had eaten lunch and dinner yesterday. The shock of seeing this place smeared with blood reminded us of that horrible spectacle in the storehouse, and forced us to accept that we hadn't really been able to run away from the scene of that tragedy. I agree too. The culprit might have left traces in this room. Amateurs like us shouldn't stir the place up. Let's leave quickly. Quickly. I just trying to fix my throat here. Hideyoshi also understood the meaning of what Battler had said, and pushed everyone to hurry out of the dining hall. The way we were then, looking at the blood any longer would have been too harsh. Nobody went against his words. Everyone raced each other out of the dining hall. It was almost as though the last person in the room would be trapped in there, all alone. No, I don't want lap bees right now. You can sit and watch. No. Not now. Not this time. Once in the hallway, we lent a hand to Kumasawa, who was still trembling and leaning against the wall, and we all headed back to the parlor together. Then, Genji returned. Oh, Genji-san, were you able to contact the police? As to that, I'm afraid I must apologize. I don't know if it was a failure of the radio or something else that caused it, but... What the... So you couldn't contact the police? Both the phone and the radio failed? My apologies. The boat will be arriving on Monday morning, and I believe we'll be able to borrow their communications equipment. Isn't there a boat on this island? Can't we just take a little trip out to the Mijima Police Department? Hideyoshi-san, that would be impossible with this weather. At the very least, we can't do anything until the typhoon passes us by. Cross-Summer's boat is being repaired and is not on the island. Therefore, we must wait for the boat coming on Monday. How could this happen? 6 people are dead, the phones and radio aren't working, and there's no boat. So until the typhoon passes and the boat comes... In other words, until tomorrow morning, we're going to be stuck on this island, able to contact the police, aren't we? We're stuck here with a bunch of corpses too. Which means that not just us, but the criminal who killed everyone is also confined to this island. That certainly follows. The culprit who killed everyone is still here on the island. So the bastard who killed Dad and the others must still be hiding somewhere, unable to escape. Damn it, damn it, damn it. I'll catch that bastard. No way I'll hand him over to the police. I'll slice him to bits myself. Ah. Maria had finally realized that something odd was happening in the parlor. Rather than noticing something odd, it was probably better to say that she felt unhappy and neglected, since everyone was getting so excited about something only she didn't know about. Ooh, Jessica and Achan, did someone die? The way she spoke was completely calm, just as though she was talking about someone who had appeared on a television drama, as though it was someone else's problem. Jessica probably didn't like that. As though trying to say, can't you tell just by looking at me, overwhelmed with grief, she flared up at Maria. They all died, everyone, my dad and Butler's parents, Koda-san and Shannon, and even your mother too. Stop it, Jessica-chan, you aren't the only one who's sad. Maria-san, I know this will come as a shock, but please listen. Your mother has died. Mama died? Ooh? Yeah, someone killed her. I know it's sad, but stay strong. How many people died? 6 people. 6 people. Damn it, damn it, damn it. How could anyone do something that cruel? There's a limit to how cruel you can be if you're human. I don't know who it is, but the culprit isn't human. There's no way their blood is red. Ooh, the culprit isn't human. It's just the blank chosen by the blank. Huh? Hey, Mario, you say something just now? Mario had just said something, but since the words were so remotely separated from the flow and context of the conversation, I couldn't understand them for a second. When I tried to ask her to repeat it again, I was shocked by the sudden sound of Aunt Natsuhi's loud voice coming from the entrance to the parlor. It looked like Aunt Natsuhi and Aunt Eva had returned from the trip to see grandfather. You can't contact them, even with a radio? If we can't use it at a time like this, what do we even have an emergency radio? My apologies. It was supposed to have a maintenance inspection every year. Wait, don't you have one of those boats? Those boat signaling devices that makes a flashing light? Couldn't you use that to contact the next island? We do not have such equipment. My sincere apologies. Just then, Kumasawa arrived, pushing a serving cart loaded with breakfast. Since there was no way we'd be able to eat in the dining hall, Hideyoshi had ordered her to take it into the parlor. Why are we eating breakfast here? Natsuhi-san, I'll tell you later. More importantly, Eva, how is father? Judging by the fact that he's not with you, it seems he will not leave his room, not even for a situation like this. He wasn't there. The room was empty. What the? Where could he have gone at a time like this? Do you mean to say the master has left his study? That is correct. I was surprised myself. I wonder when he left his room. Do any of you have an idea? Natsuhi looked at Genji and Kanan as she said this. Maybe she was trying to ask whether the servants who served directly under the one-winged eagle knew a place he might go. However, it was probably the other way around. Their faces made it clear that those who knew Kinzo best realized even more than the rest how impossible it was for him to leave his room. Even we have no idea. As you all know, within that study, the master had everything from a place to sleep to a bathroom. I couldn't imagine him leaving that room except for a significant reason. In that case, what? Isn't it natural to assume that one of those significant reasons came up? We still cannot be certain that's the case. Anyway, he's a fickle person, so it's possible he went for a walk by himself, unaware of the current situation. If that is the case, then we must act in all haste to tell him what has happened and ask for instructions. Yeah, I'll walk in the typhoon. That's right, although I don't want to think about it. It's possible something has happened to him, isn't it? I'd rather not even consider such a sinister possibility. No one had seen Kinzo since the discovery of those 6 terrible corpses. On top of that, the phones were broken, the radio wouldn't reach anyone, and there was no way to contact the police. Apparently, the typhoon would leave tomorrow and a boat would come. Until then, no one could rely on anyone outside the island, nor could they escape the island. The tragedy had hit everyone so abruptly that they'd all lost their composure. Everyone felt a heavy silence. Everyone was impatient. Even though they needed to do something, they couldn't think of anything. So some of them held their heads in their arms while others got irritated. Right now, no one could explain what was occurring on this island, Rokenjima. After that, we ate the breakfast Kumasawa-san had made, which felt dry and tasteless. Of course, this was right after something like that had happened. No one felt particularly hungry. However, we understood logically that not eating would weaken our bodies. It would also be rude to Kumasawa-san, who had made the breakfast. Kumasawa-san had taken some unusual Western vegetables, ones that Goda-san had probably ordered for his ultra-elaborate meals, and cooked them in a Japanese style, which made them turn an unpleasant color. As to what Goda-san had been planning to cook with those ingredients, right then, I couldn't even imagine it. If I did think about it, I'd be reminded of the way Goda-san died, and a sour taste would fill the inside of my mouth. To reiterate for anyone unaware, everyone had, like, half their heads bashed in, basically. Their faces were, like, half unrecognizable. Everyone pretended to eat for the time being, but of course, no one made much progress. Then we began pooling our knowledge of our current situation. First off, 6 people, which included Uncle Kraus, my dad, Kirie-san, Aunt Rosa, Goda-san, and Shannon-chan, had been found in the Rose Garden storehouse as brutally mutilated corpses. And yet, we still couldn't contact the police, since both the phones and the radio were unusable. So, until the typhoon passed, there was nothing we could do. Furthermore, Grandfather, we might have hoped would be able to show a little leadership in this kind of situation, had disappeared some time ago. Goda-san hadn't made breakfast, so Grandfather's stomach must have been empty. And if he'd just been taking a casual walk, we should have been able to hear him whining about how hungry he was by now. And despite that, he hadn't appeared. There was more than a small chance that he'd gotten caught up in this crime. According to my aunts, on the way back from Kinzo's study, they'd searched for him, calling out on every floor, but were unable to find him. Considering the timing of it all, it's only reasonable to assume that this disappearance had something to do with the crime. We figured Dad and the rest were probably killed in the dining hall, and then painstakingly moved to the storehouse. So maybe Grandfather had already been killed, and dragged to some strange place which we simply haven't discovered yet. No one actually said it out loud, but this theory seemed extremely convincing. We will go check that all the doors and windows are locked. We must also conduct a thorough search for Father. The children must remain in this room. Eva-san and Hideyoshi-san, I'm sorry, but please stay here with the children. I'd like to ask you the same, Dr. Nanjo. I understand. I will be here. Natsui followed the servants, Genji-san, Kumasawa-san, and Kanon-kun out of the parlor. Sorry. All that was left was Aunt Eva, Uncle Hideyoshi, Dr. Nanjo, and the 4 of us children, a total of 7 people. Obviously, from this point onwards, it's important to keep track of who's where, so it's good that the game spells it out for us. Let's all stick together and maybe watch some television while we wait, though I doubt we'll find anything good in the middle of the day on a Sunday. Uncle Hideyoshi started acting cheerfully, trying to brighten up this gloomy atmosphere. Ooh, good show. Watch it, watch it. Ooh. Oh, really? You want to watch TV, Maria-chan? Then come and watch it with your uncle. Maria was the only one who joined in. Even though Maria had been told of her mother's death, she didn't show the slightest flicker in her emotions. Was it really normal for a 9-year-old girl like Maria to act so much like a very young child? Everyone else's mood failed to improve, and they each sank absent-mindedly into their sofas. Anaki, can I ask you something? What is it? Just now, in the storehouse, you said something about Shannon-chan and a ring. Did you give that to her? George Anaki didn't answer, but he hung his head and closed both of his eyes. There could be no clearer response. Put it, Balor. Figure it out yourself. You're right. I shouldn't have asked. That's right. It was me. Last night, I proposed to her. That was when I gave her the ring. I told her that tomorrow, she should put it on whatever finger she wanted, as her answer. I guess it was a pretty pretentious thing to say. And the ring had been on the ring finger of Shana-chan's left hand. Well, several years ago, Shana came to me asking for advice. About you, George Nissan. Wonder what she could have said. Shana was always really bad at lying. It was obvious pretty quickly that you were the one she was talking about. She asked whether it'd be okay for her to get close to someone, even though she was only a servant. She asked about what kinds of things boys like, what kind of clothes she should wear to make them happy. Lots of stuff like that. Well, I guess you could say I felt envious hearing her say that. So, then she was given an engagement ring, and it all ended right there. Different people value things differently, but being proposed to by a man, well, it can be the high point of your life. So I'm sure, last night, I'm sure Shannon was happy. From the bottom of her heart, happier than she's ever been since the day of her birth. I'm trying to clear my throat out a bit. Tough. George Anaki sighed deeply without raising his head. Or maybe tears had risen to his eyes. It seemed Shauna was on duty in the guest house last night, but because she was too embarrassed to go back to the guest house with me, she went over to the mansion. Think about how Shannon must have felt. When you receive an engagement ring, then no matter how much warning you've been given beforehand, it's perfectly normal to get so excited that your mind goes blank. She must have been incredibly embarrassed. And then, Shannon went to the mansion, even though she hadn't been assigned there, helped go to Shannon with his work, and got caught up in this crime. If only I hadn't given her that ring on that day, in that place, Shannon wouldn't have... Saya wouldn't have been caught up in that crime. Yeah. Aniki, that's the one place where you're wrong. It's definitely wrong. So don't cry anymore. Valor-kun, let's leave him be. After Anteva said that, I stopped talking to him. Most waste words of comfort might actually do more harm than good. Jessica sat down next to Aniki and put an arm around him. Maybe only Jessica, who had known about Aniki and Shannon's love since the beginning, and who had even discussed that relationship with Shannon, could comfort Aniki now. I went over to Anteva and sat down on the opposite sofa. Valor-kun, you really are strong. Looks like you've kept a good hold on yourself. Well, look, the depth of the love becomes the depth of the wound, right? After all, it's not like how that old bastard died has anything to do with me. I feel bad about Kiria-san, but... well, she wasn't actually my parents. My. If that's so, you certainly were crying a lot back then. Well, I did think at least that much crying was due as gratitude to the parent who raised me. The speed of that changeover and that dry tone must have come from Rudolph. That kid would always get violently happy, sad, and angry. But he'd always regain his cool immediately afterwards. It's nothing like that. I haven't really been able to get over the shock yet. I think the only difference between me and everyone else is the kinds of emotions it stirred in me. What do you mean? I've been acting much calmer than George, Aniki, and Jessica. That wasn't because my sadness was any less intense, or because I'd already recovered. My sadness was simply getting replaced gradually with a different emotion. Rather than sad, I'd say I'm more pissed off. What bastard did this and where? It's kind of been eating at me that I didn't get a chance to smack him upside the face. That's what I really wanted to do. I couldn't forgive myself if I just sat there, overwhelmed with sadness and hugging my knees. Now it begins. Since the time Dad and the others were killed, this island has been covered by the typhoon, which means the bastard responsible for all this is still somewhere on this island. Yes, that would seem to be the case. I wonder if they're hiding somewhere in that dark forest even now. I felt like I'd had a very similar conversation with Kiria-san the night before. That's right. After the letter from the person claiming to be Beatrice appeared at the dining table last night, we talked about whether or not a 19th person actually exists. Anteva, do you think this murder has anything to do with the letter from Beatrice last night? That one? Well, I wonder. All the siblings agreed that the mysterious letter was sent to further complicate the problem of father's inheritance. As to whether that and the case this morning are related, it's impossible to tell at this stage. Was that letter really given to Maria by some witch called Beatrice? How could it be? All of it was a farce devised by father, wasn't it? He made Shannon-chan, or someone with the dress from the portrait, and tricked Maria-chan, right? Isn't that just the kind of overly intricate prank father would pull? Last night, I talked with Kiria-san about whether Beatrice actually exists. And Kiria-san also said that Beatrice was probably one of the 18 of us. Isn't that obvious? There's no one else on this island besides us, right? And there must be someone amongst us who is pretending to be Beatrice. There's no one else but us on this island, you think? Obviously, right? Are you saying there could be someone else here other than us? No one is on this island except us. There are only 18 people, so the one pretending to be Beatrice has to be one of those 18. Kiria-san denied the existence of a 19th person by spinning the chessboard around. Even though Aunt Ava hadn't constructed an argument that complicated, her opinion was at least the same. Except if that's the case, our situation starts to look very ugly. At the time of Beatrice's letter, the whole thing could be passed off as a prank set up by someone or another. However, if we're assuming there's no 19th person, we can't ignore this anymore. In other words, if there's no 19th person, then the culprit who killed Dad and the others is also one of the 18, right? So in other words, the person who killed them is one of the people inside this very mansion right now. Aunt Ava smiled meaningfully. It looked like she thought this conclusion should have been obvious from the very beginning. The culprit carried the bodies of those 6 into the storehouse. But even that was an impressive feat, don't you think? That shutter is always closed and locked, right? In other words, in order to carry them into the storehouse, the culprit would need to unlock the shutter. Understand? Is it possible the shutter was left open by mistake that day? The servant's set is always kept locked. In other words, unless the culprit took the keys from the servant room, there's no way they could have opened the storehouse. I wonder if the key in the servant room was the only one. Genji-san said that was the case. which means the culprit knew where that single key was kept and took it. Just now, I watched when Conan returned the key to the servant room. The wall was packed with keys, and I don't think a novice would know where or what those keys went to. The culprit was miraculously able to find the storehouse key among all of those. Furthermore, even though the key didn't have a tag or anything sticking to it, they knew it was the key to the storehouse behind the rose garden. That means they also knew where the storehouse was. I'll say it even clearer. The culprit knew the inside of the servant room well. Our argument was extremely plain and clear. If the bodies had been found, thrown somewhere in the bushes of the rose garden, there wouldn't have been much to go on. However, if there was only one key to the storehouse in the servant room, and it was stored with such a large group of keys, a novice would not be able to tell them apart. This meant the culprit was someone who went in the servant room a lot and was familiar with the locations of the keys. The family members didn't normally go into the servant room, which means that one of the servants is the culprit. I'm sorry, but even I can't tell you any more than that. However, I'll tell you one thing. What's that? It's reasonable to think that culprits are multiple in number and fairly well armed. They'd have to be, wouldn't they? They had to assault the four in the dining hall and kill them, drag a total of 6 bodies all the way to the storehouse beyond the rose garden, and arrange for that disgusting makeup and the graffiti on the shutter. There's no way that a single culprit could carry out all of that on their own, right? It made sense. It probably would have been possible for a single person with enough time, but it would take so incredibly long. It was probably safe to assume that a significant number of people were involved. So what you're saying is that maybe all the servants were in cahoots. Please keep it quiet, okay? It wouldn't be right to voice mere speculation like this. And if it really is true, what would you do next? They might not let us leave here alive. This is an opponent who had no trouble killing Nissan and the 3 others. Right now, the only ones I can count on to fight with me are the 3... to fight with me, as in like on my side, are the 3 in my family and maybe you, which comes to a total of 4 people, right? We're no better off than they were last night. In short, it'd be easy for the culprits to massacre the rest of us. I'd been playing detective with Aunt Eva, trying to expose the person who had killed Dad and the rest before the police did. If only I could cleverly penetrate the culprit's identity and stick the proof in their face. I've been so sure that, just like in one of those detective movies, the culprit would then give up and surrender. However, the culprit would only surrender if there was no way for him to fight back. The culprits behind the crime on this island were far from helpless, and might even be able to massacre all of the remaining people here. And on top of that, this island was like a giant closed room, cut off from the outside world by the typhoon. So they had a full day, until tomorrow, to kill, scheme, and camouflage themselves. In short, it wasn't a safe atmosphere where we could get very far by playing detective. To the contrary, we were at a stage where we had to be scared stiff, since playing detective might displease the culprits, and cause them to commit another mass murder. Well, it's just a possibility, right? But I can't bring myself to trust the servants yet, and that doesn't mean I only suspect them. Don't you think there might be some mastermind behind all this? Mastermind? Why do you say that? It's just a feeling. Think about what the word servant literally means. It means someone who serves as someone else's arms and legs, right? It was a bunch of Ushimura family members who got killed, so naturally there must be someone involved who stands to gain from that result. I mean, you're the only one who didn't lose, like, spouse. So, In fact, she's the only of Kinzo's actual blood relatives, like, blood children, still left alive because Natsu made it into the family, so... Right now, she actually stands to gain the most from this, to be honest. So yeah, this stuff updates, so... I read out all these yesterday because they'd updated. Kinzo says, Ushimura Kinzo. Disappeared from his study unnoticed. Kinzo's study is everything from a bed to a toilet to a bathtub, so it's extremely rare for him to go outside. However, he does occasionally go for a walk on a whim without telling anybody, and his disappearance invariably leads to a huge uproar throughout the house. He usually comes back as soon as he gets hungry. Usually. This was also plain and clear. The Ushimura family had been right in the middle of discussions about how to distribute the inheritance when grandfather died. If this case followed the standard form of any classic mystery novel, the crime was definitely caused by someone with ties to the Ushimura family and who was involved in the inheritance problem. Aunt Eva had probably read a few books in that genre herself. Her argument may have had a few blind assumptions in it, but it was a standard conclusion that anyone might have reached. I think most people would end up suspecting the servants, even if they used different reasoning to get there. Especially the story about the key to the shutter. That made it very easy to suspect that one of the servants was involved. And that's why I don't like it. What do you mean, you don't like it? Nah, just talking to myself. Hehehe. I tried to dodge her question by joking, but I couldn't erase the sense of unease welling up inside me. After all, her conclusion was such an easy one to reach. A conclusion that anyone could reach. And I just couldn't be satisfied with that. If I tried spinning the chessboard around like I'd learned from Kiria-san, this was exactly why a servant couldn't possibly be the culprit. If the servants really were the culprits, they wouldn't hide the bodies in a place connected to themselves. Why on earth would they use the rose garden shed? They were the ones in charge of the key that could unlock it. The police would probably immediately pursue whoever had been in control of the key. It was even possible that some other facts might come to light as a result. The more we think of the servants as the culprits, the less reason they had to carry the bodies into the storehouse. But what if they knew we'd think that, and put the corpses in the storehouse for that very reason? No, that's completely impossible. When the police come and inspect the scene of the crime, they'll probably be able to uncover many things. No matter how carefully the culprits carried out the murder, some traces will definitely be found. Well, as much as forensics can accomplish in 1986, I guess. In other words, they had everything to lose and nothing to gain. If you think about it this way, and look at this murder game from the culprit's side, it's hard to imagine why they'd want to call attention to the corpses. Once the corpses were found, it could result in someone sending a report to the police, or it might make the remaining people more cautious, or it might make the survivors start to search for the culprit. None of these things would make life any easier for the culprit. It's just like the words of the main character's mother in a novel I read recently called Hikurahashi no Naku Koro ni. Every story needs to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. Eliminating that beginning is essential for the perfect crime. Right now, we don't know where Grandfather is. We don't know if he's already become a victim, or if he's one of the culprits. But this state of confusion must be beneficial to the killer. The culprit has absolutely nothing to gain by showing us the bodies in such an obvious way and making us all realize there's been a murder. In fact, this is the perfect place to spin the chessboard around. In other words, showing us the corpses in such a flashy way must be the culprit's goal in and of itself. So at the very least, to the culprit, the appearance of Sid's corpses there meant more than the deaths themselves. In other words, the culprit wanted this murder on display. To whom? To us. This is a message. The culprit's trying to shove something in our faces. I don't know what it is. At this point in time, this vulgar mass murder isn't making me feel anything, except a malice directed towards all of us. Malice towards all of us. Is it? Is it indeed? Each one of the survivors has some kind of connection to one of the 6 victims. Uncle Cross's death brought Jessica the grief of losing a family member. The deaths of Dad and Kiria-san brought me sorrow. Aunt Rose's death brought Maria sorrow. Goda-san probably shocked his fellow servants, and Shana-chan's death brought grief both to Georgianaki, who had proposed to her, and Kaden-kun, who had loved her like an older sister. Everyone now on this island has received an equal amount of sadness. Aunt Ava was sure that the servants were in cahoots, but then, how could you explain the deaths of Goda-san and Shana-chan? At any rate, by this argument, the grief caused by the Sid's deaths hit everyone but Aunt Ava and Uncle Hideyoshi. Suspicious. Even Aunt Ava, who directed suspicion at the servants and acted as though she herself was beyond suspicion, could not be ruled out as a suspect. In the first place, she was able to argue that the servants were suspicious by focusing on the shutter's key. But if you look at it from a perspective of motive and who would gain, Aunt Ava's name rises to the top of the list. I pretty much already said why, but they're gonna go over it. Umineko's good at laying out the facts. I know what you're thinking, Battler-kun. Huh? Eve, oh no. Please don't tell anybody about how my head's so full of obscene stuff. I'm the one who's going to gain the most from these murders. Since I'm going to be suspected anyway, I might as well get it out in the open. I tried to dodge the issue by joking around, but apparently it didn't work. It was not stupid. The inheritance will be divided into as many parts as there are siblings. Right now, I'm the only one of the 4 left. All the assets of the Yoshimura family will become mine. If Uncle Hideyoshi heard you, he'd say, could you give it a rest? It's not funny. I'm sorry. I was just fooling around since I'm going to be suspected anyway, no matter how much I try to smooth it over. That's why, from my point of view, this murder might have been designed to cast suspicion on me. Unfortunately, my alibi for last night is weak. Could you tell me a bit more about last night? As you know, the discussion between the siblings of how to slice up and eat the inheritance continued until late in the night. But I don't know how late it lasted. My husband and I had woken up early that morning. We were sleepy, and so a little past midnight they let us go. We then returned to the guest house and rested there. Can anyone other than Inkle Hideyoshi prove that? No, wait, it's not like I suspect you or anything, okay? Hehe. Oh, are you sure about that? I don't know if it counts as proof, but when we returned to the guest house, we were greeted by Genji-san, who asked if we needed a towel. I think that should be enough to prove that we returned to the guest house a little after midnight. Though, if my theory was correct, the servants would all be in cahoots, and that wouldn't actually make for much of an alibi. Yeah, you've got a point there. Guess that means I'm playing detective with a real culprit right now, huh? However, let me say this for my honor's sake. If I was after the inheritance, I'd never commit such a bizarre set of murders. After all, if I just wanted to make them forfeit the rights to the inheritance, it wouldn't matter to me how they died. It'd be much smarter of me to try to make their deaths look like accidents. Especially if you're assuming I laid out some careful plan that involved even the servants. You've got a point there. If you're killing someone for personal gain, you definitely shouldn't make it look like a murder. Exactly. That's why I'm in such a blue mood. The police will probably treat me like the mastermind and investigate all sorts of things. Not fun at all. Aunt Ava shrugged with a bitter smile. It was just as easy to suspect Aunt Ava as it was to suspect the culprits. So if we spin the chessboard around, does that make it impossible for the culprit to be her, suspicious as she is? However, if that sort of argument always works, then motive can never help us in any way. No, that can't be right. Knowing the motive must give us powerful clues towards knowing the culprit. And that's why murders from all time periods disguise crimes in complicated ways, cleverly preventing the motives from being discovered. I don't get it. I just don't get it. Every time I spin the chessboard around, it keeps flipping from front to back and back to front. My thoughts bring me closer to the truth, or are they just the ramblings of a madman? They at least pick up ideas to the readers. Aunt Ava didn't want to talk any more than that, so I folded my arms and headed to the window to cool my head a little. As I looked over the parlor, I saw George Aniki and the others gathered, talking. It looked like they were talking about the magic circle that had been painted onto the shutter. As Uncle Hideyoshi thought back to that time, he started drawing the shape in the margins of Mari's notebook. I see, since Mari was second only to grandfather knowledge of the occult, she might understand what it meant. I think it was probably something like that. There was a mark that looked like a variation of a cross, and then, surrounding the circle all around the perimeter, were these closely packed strange letters. On all four sides of the cross, and in the four corners, there was something written. It didn't look like the alphabet or something like that. It was what they call ancient characters. And then, around the top of the circumference, there was a small mark, 5 small circles arranged in a plus sign, and straight lines connecting them. Ah yeah, there definitely was something like that drawn there. Yep, there's no mistake in the shape. I don't understand the thin characters, but the arrangement was nearly the same. Everyone was staring down at the shape, so I stared down at it too. From what I'd heard, this had been painted on the shutter to the storehouse with some material that looked like blood. That where the cousins arrived after the storehouse had already been opened, to clarify here. So they saw the bodies, but not what was on the shutter. I see, this sure is unsettling. Grandfather's probably the only one who'd want to draw something this weird. Seriously, where did he go? I want to grab him and ask what the hell this is supposed to mean. Jessica's voice contained impatience and anger. She hadn't gone so far as to say grandfather was the culprit, but she seemed sure the grandfather knew something about the culprit's background. Of course, if you were searching for a link connecting the Ushimura family to the occult, 10 out of 10 people would think of grandfather. Also, to a person who knew nothing of the occult, this strange mark would have no meaning, which meant that this might have been something addressed to grandfather. That's right, and the reason the crime was shown to the survivors was so they'd find this. In that case, where had grandfather, the essential recipient of this message, disappeared off to? Does this shape ring any bells? Ooh, Mario looked at the shape with a serious face. Maybe she was enthusiastic because this was her area of expertise. This is me whenever someone asks me about kanji. However, her appearance was that of someone separated from the events at hand. As though this thing hadn't been drawn on the shutter closed around her mother's corpse. My first impression was the design resembled a German cross. It certainly does have that kind of design. Does that mean it has something to do with Germany? The German cross was originally a crest from a religious order of knights, and was supposed to protect pilgrims traveling to sacred places. So in other words, this magic circle might have some religious meaning? This is starting to sound like gibberish. When I looked over at all of them, preparing to jump into the discussion, something shocked me. Mari was smiling, an eerie and incomprehensible expression on her face. It was almost as if she was making fun of everyone's ignorance. It was an expression I would have dreamed to find in Maria's face. And she laughed. That eerie, jarring laugh. Something I didn't want to believe was possible. even though I was looking at it right in front of my eyes. Hehehe. You people aren't even close. Can't you tell just by looking? While everyone was busy being scared out of their wits, Moria kept on cackling happily by herself. After a while, that laugh was suddenly and abruptly cut off, but her expression still looked like it belonged to someone completely different than Moria. This is the 7th magic circle of the sun. The characters are written in Hebrew. Give it here. Sure. Moria stole the writing materials from the stunned Hideyoshi's hand. She then started drawing another magic circle with a rustle, right next to the one Hideyoshi had drawn. See? It looked sort of like this, right? Yes, it was. But Moria, incredible. You really do know a lot. Jessica tried to smooth things over by praising Moria. Maybe she wanted to confirm that this was still the Moria we all knew so well. But Moria didn't answer her in any way in particular. Moria began swiftly writing unfamiliar characters in the corners of the shape. Of course, Moria knows Hebrew. When Uncle Hideyoshi and Dr. Nanjo saw them, their eyes immediately began to open wide. Written on the top and bottom, and left and right, are the names of the angels who preside over wind, fire, earth, and water. Jasan, Earl, Borlak, and Talia had, I'm guessing there. At the four corners are the names of the four great kings, Ariel, Seraph, Tharshis, and Cherub. Is that what you saw? Even if they hadn't been able to correctly write what they'd seen, when they were once again shown something identical, it wasn't difficult for them to realize the two were the same. When Moria asked them whether it matched, Uncle Hideyoshi and Dr. Nanjo nodded over and over again. There's no mistake, that's it. I'm sure there were characters that looked like that. How were you able to write something like that? There were also characters written around the circumference. I know. Like this, right? Moria quickly began to surround the circumference with more Hebrew writing. It's from Psalms of the Old Testament, the 16th and 17th verses of the 116th Psalm. You must have at least read the Bible, right? Acting as though knowing this was only common sense, Moria laughed. For a while, everyone, including me, was at a loss for words. A little later, Georgianiki returned to his senses and slowly managed to speak. That's incredible. I'm surprised. So, what meaning does this magic circle have? It's a magic circle to borrow the power of the sun. He who wears it as a talisman drawn in gold shall be able to break free from the bonds of any prison and receive the power to gain freedom. To break free from bonds and gain freedom? It sounds deep. The word bonds is not limited in its interpretation to some kind of physical object. Therefore, it does not only hold meaning for people locked up in an actual jail. It can also refer to the release from mental bonds, such as ties of obligation and inescapable fate. Ties of obligation and inescapable fate, you say? That's also pretty deep. But I really don't understand. What does this have to do with those 6 bodies? Far from being released, they were killed and stuffed in a storehouse, weren't they? It's not like the magic circle was drawn for their sakes. The sits of them were also there for the sake of the magic circle. It's truly pitiable. Hehehe. What do you mean? What in the world do you mean when you say the sits of them were there for the sake of the magic circle? Rani lifted up her pointer finger and waggled it as if she were making fun of us. That's written around the circumference. Can't you read it? Psalms, chapter 116, verses 16 and 17. I'll read it for you. The Lord has freed me from my chains. I will offer to you the sacrifice of thanksgiving, and will call on the name of the Lord. See? See, you say? I've got no idea what you're talking about. You're saying they're human sacrifices? If what Moria had just read aloud was a vital part of the magic circle, then it was saying that sacrifices had to be offered in order for this magic circle to be effective. So human sacrifices had been offered inside the storehouse, where the magic circle had been drawn. A heartbeat later, everyone else seemed to reach the same conclusion. Some people were shocked, and others spat out that this was insane as they punched their knees. This was starting to get incredibly disturbing, and we couldn't accept it or understand it. I don't care what kind of magic circles or curses that people believe in, I don't pick a fight with them. But did they really kill Dad and the rest as sacrifices for crap like that? I just couldn't stand that feeling. Compared to this, I preferred it when we were still disgusted by that theory about the fight over the inheritance. As I started getting pissed off with the feeling between anger and sadness, I broke from the circle everyone was in and returned once again to the window. Something had gone insane since yesterday. There was that letter from the witch, Beatrice, that Moria had read aloud at last night's dinner. Ever since that point, it feels like like this whole mansion and this whole island have been getting more and more firmly locked inside some kind of bizarre world. That's right. When I think back on it, that letter was an invitation from the witch. The ruler of the nighttime island had invited us inhabitants of the day into another world. The phone and the radio had been interrupted, and the island was shut off by the typhoon. So you really could call this place another world cut off from the real one by now. Yeah, as this island is now, it's perfectly normal for a witch to send us letters and for human sacrifices to be offered up for the sake of magic circles. So what will happen next? Will some weird people wearing goat masks start doing the Bond Festival dance or something? It's hopeless, I don't get it. The inside of my head's all screwed up and I don't even know what to think. Anger, sadness, the opposing emotions all swirled up together, and they started to suck me in. Unable to resist, I could do nothing but cover my eyes with my hands and trust to my mind and body as I started getting sucked in. Poor guy. As I started losing heart, I began to recall a memory from when I was small. It was from when I was very young. I'd unfortunately seen a scary occult movie on TV, and for a while, I hadn't even been able to go to the bathroom by myself. That old bastard gave an exaggerated laugh and said this. Hey, Battler, why do you think they go to all the trouble to make movies like this about demons and the occult and such? It's because they don't exist. Something that ridiculous can't be found anywhere on the planet. Because they don't exist, people want to see them and go to a lot of effort making them. That's why those occult movies just make me laugh. If I were forced to choose, I'd say rather than demons and monsters, this year's earnings call and angry wives are 100 million times scarier. I'll go further, okay? From my point of view, getting scared is a recreational emotion. Something for people who've got room to relax both in their hearts and their lifestyles. They had so much free time, they didn't know what to do with it. So in order to entertain the mind with unusual emotions, people started creating a culture with demons and the occult and stuff. Seriously, why have I been acting so damn thick-headed? I was totally taken in. Don't try to mess with me. This is the human world. I don't give a damn about witches, demons, magic circles, and sacrifices. The human who killed Dad and everyone else is still in this island. That's all there is to it, right? The next person who started speaking to my heart was Kiriya-san. You see, in both chess and shogi, when you reach the very, very last stage of the game, and get closer and closer to cornering your opponent, the number of optimal makes you could possibly make gets smaller and smaller. Therefore, if you're backing someone against the wall, or if someone's doing the same to you, both players' moves become infinitely easier to read. In other words, when you're completely cornered and you think you have no moves left, that's the moment when it's easiest to read your opponent. However, when a person is forced into a defensive position, they can't help but lose their ability to think clearly, so they aren't able to get their minds around their opponent's moves. That's when you spin the chessboard around. With all my strength, I slapped my face with both hands. Now my eyes were truly open. When you don't understand anything, when you're completely cornered just like I am now, isn't that the perfect time to spin the chessboard around? Well, in the defensive, we can't even guess at the culprit's scheme. If we spin it around to look at it that way, just what might we see? First off... Okay, let me get water and use the bathroom real quick if we're going to get into heavy deductions and stuff here. I'll be right back. Checking some things, don't mind me. Yeah, okay. Alright. First off, at the time the culprit committed the murders, they knew the island was being cut off by the typhoon. Therefore, they should have understood that even if they carried out the murders, they wouldn't be able to get away early the next morning. In short, the culprit had begun without securing a way to escape. Furthermore, that bastard tossed the corpses in the storehouse, then was even kind enough to say, "Here they are," with that weird bit of graffiti. In other words, since we'd probably find the corpses sooner or later, they wanted to show them off to us. If we'd all been dim and hadn't noticed the storage shed, the culprit's goal would not have been achieved, would it? If you think about it this way, that bastard of a culprit, since this morning they must have been watching our every move with bated breath. After all, if we had been so kind as to discover what was on the storehouse, all of that hard work and preparation they did last night would have just gone poof. What did the culprit want to make us feel by showing us the corpses in the storehouse? All 6 of the bodies had their faces noticeably destroyed. Was it a grudge? A warning? The debasement of the bodies had occurred after death, so it hadn't been the means by which the culprit had killed. It didn't mean anything to those who had been killed. It did have meaning to those who found the bodies. The culprit wanted to make it appear that they'd been killed so brutally. After thinking this way, I really want to tell the bastard to stop taking me so lightly. We just dance to that tune. If you're told, "Please be scared," you can't just say, "Really? Sure thing." When someone tells the great Ushimino battler the entrance is right here, and the kind of guy who will start wanting to sneak in through the window is the guy who goes left instead of right in platformers. The next thing that had concerned me was that so-called magic circle in the shutter. As Moria, who'd shown that her knowledge of the occult rivaled grandfather's, had recognized that magic circle was genuine. They must have drawn that thing in pitch-black darkness, taking a lot of time and holding an umbrella in one hand. Isn't that amount of hard work and perfectionism impressive? What purpose would have been worth all that effort? If we were looking for a fan of the occult in this mansion, most likely all of us would naturally suspect grandfather. Did they want to make us think grandfather was involved? But if that's all they wanted, they could have just drawn any old scribble that looked like a magic circle. It wasn't like any of us amateurs would be able to tell the difference between genuine and fake. However, this magic circle was genuine, and furthermore, it had even been written in Hebrew. So this magic circle had a message that could only be understood by someone with knowledge of the occult. A message is a form of communication. By sending it, they were hoping for a reaction. A reaction. For some reason, we couldn't find grandfather now. I don't know how grandfather might have spotted the magic circle in the shutter, but did he choose to hide himself in reaction to it? No. Was it a trap to make us suspect that grandfather had participated? You could read it either way, and that's annoying. What kind of reaction was the culprit hoping to get out of us by putting on this occult show? Somehow, that felt like the culprit's weak point. A letter from Beatrice that Moria had read aloud during last night's dinner sprang back into my mind. This is a freak who'd asked us to enjoy a battle of wits. Isn't that interesting? This is a battle of wits between us and the witch. Will we be sucked up by her occult game first, or will we pull off her fake skin first? There's a whole day until the typhoon passes. Why not enjoy ourselves? And this is the main premise of Umineko. The battle with the witch. I finally noticed that the inside of the parlor had gone quiet again. Everyone had sunk into their favorite sofas, some deep in thought, some irritated, some acting depressed. Moria was once again enjoying the TV as if she'd never left it. It looked like she found the commercials more fun than the boring program, and she happily yelled ooh and giggled. I stared at each person's appearance in turn. If there isn't a 19th person, the culprit must be in this room. Hideyosha and Ava, George and Jessica, Dr. Nanjo, Aria. I think everyone's in this room right now, are they? And Balor. We still have Natsu and the other servants, and Kinzo. Right now, Natsu, he's searching the mansion with the servants, right? Then we shouldn't say in this room. Yeah, see. In this mansion is where the culprit has to be. After all, it's possible Aunt Nazi was behind this, and we still can't deny that one of the servants might be the killer. Anyone could be guilty. Still, Aunt Nazi and the rest sure are taking their time. Of course, it's not a small mansion, but isn't this taking a little too long just to walk around, checking the windows and doors? Just as I was thinking this, Aunt Natsu and the rest returned. Not one of them was missing, but our relief was short-lived. Everyone looked at Aunt Natsu in shock. The talk I'd had with Aunt Ava started to creep back into my mind. The possibility that the culprits had enough in numbers or weapons to kill all of those 6 at once. Forgive me if I've startled you. I brought this to be prepared for the worst. After all, that thing in Aunt Natsu's hand was a rifle. Of all the, alternate portraits this game has, which isn't really many, they have some that have characters holding guns, which I think is just kind of funny. At a glance, its silhouette looked a lot like a hunting gun, but it was unusually short and kind of looked like a kid-sized weapon. Usually it's just the faces that change after all. However, it had a weightiness to it that made it clear it was no kid's toy. That gun is Kinzo-san's, isn't it? Did you know about it? That's right. I remembered it was in Father's old collection, and I managed to find it. Whoa, awesome. Natsu-san, is that thing real? Yes, it's real. It can fire live ammunition. Long ago, Father used it to scare away wild birds. That thing takes me back. Where did you find that? No matter how much I asked him to let me touch it, he never let me lay even one finger on it. Oh, Grandfather had one of these? I didn't know that. Long ago, Grandfather was really addicted to cowboy films. That generation really liked this kind of rifle. Is that a Winchester? But I've never seen one that short before. Ah, I remember, it's that gun. That really takes me back. That's the ones Steve McQueen fired off in Wanted, Alive or Dead. Father sure has good taste. Is it an item the order... Is it an item? Oh, it is an item the Master ordered specifically from America long ago. As you can see, it is a working gun, so please don't tell anyone about this. Remember, Japan has very strict weapon possession laws. You can't just have a gun. I don't know the details behind the laws, but... well, I just know it's more strict. He was quite fond of it right after he managed to acquire it. It seems the workings that ejected the cartridges were more interesting to him than shooting it, and he played around with it back in the forest all the time. Oh ho ho. Still, it's rather disturbing. Are you sure you should be dragging this out? This is to prepare for the worst. There was probably more than one offender involved. Furthermore, those horrible people killed 6 of us, including my husband. I have a responsibility to protect everyone until tomorrow in my husband's place. As Natsu-san said this, he slumped down into one of the sofas and took a deep breath. She'd been trying to find Grandfather, as well as check the doors and windows. Since Grandfather wasn't with her, she probably still didn't know where he was. I carefully checked all the doors and windows throughout the mansion. However, we must be prepared for anything. Everyone, I think it would be best if we all remained here. Oh, good point. If everyone's gathered here, then we can all feel more secure by keeping an eye on each other. What do you mean by that, Eva-san? Nothing really. I'm just agreeing with your opinion, aren't I? There was a stormy atmosphere between the two of them. If you think about who is the most suspicious from the inheritance problem standpoint, Aunt Ava was the obvious answer. However, there was no proof that Aunt Natsu was innocent. No, if you read Beatrice's letter as one of Grandfather's complicated pranks and think of this crime as just an extension of that, there's more than enough reason to suspect even Grandfather. Also, Aunt Natsu thought the criminal was on the outside, but Aunt Ava thought the criminal was on the inside. In short, it was the question of whether or not a 19th person exists. That same question had been repeatedly and endlessly since last night's dinner. Oh, repeated as not... Right. With a letter from the witch who called herself Beatrice. So was the culprit among us, or not? And did the witch Beatrice exist, or not? If you assume that something as stupid as the witch can't exist, you're basically saying that one of these relatives here, who share a common bloodline, is the culprit. If that was too unpleasant, it'd be much more comfortable to simply accept the fairy tale-like character of the witch. A witch? A witch drawing a bizarre magic circle and offering human sacrifices? If I could accept that rubbish, I'd be able to trust all the people in this room. However, damn common sense got in the way. I kept repeating that witches don't exist. In that case, the culprit must be among us. Stop saying it. Stop saying it, Powler. In the middle of the seemingly endless rain, none of us could break the silence. Fast forward a few hours. If you think about it, you know, we sure are among some lethal company right now. Potentially. Lunch ended, and the servants removed the tableware and went to the kitchen. The wind and rain neither weakened or strengthened, and the island remained cut off from the outside world. At first, it seemed as though Natsu planned to stop anyone from taking a step outside the room. But when it came time to prepare lunch, she finally realized this would be impossible. However, in order to avoid having anyone alone in the kitchen, she told the 3 servants to go together. Because of that, the servants were the first ones given the right to leave this stuffy parlor, which had been packed with 11 people. Since breakfast had immediately followed that terrible incident, preventing most of us from eating much. Everyone tore into their lunches in silence. So yeah, 11 people because 6 dead and grandfather's missing. Just keep track of that. I will wash the dishes so you can rest a while. Could, Genji-san. You want something to drink? I don't need anything. Got it? I don't need anything either. You two must have been so busy and so early in the morning. It's no wonder you're worn out. The only noise was that of Kumasawa washing the dishes, which resounded throughout the kitchen. Genji and Kanan sat in some chairs a short distance away, their eyes lightly closed. Just as Kumasawa had said, those two had probably built up a great deal of fatigue, but that didn't mean they could let it show in front of their relatives. Avoiding that was one of their virtues. After the silence had continued for some time, Kanan opened his mouth and muttered, Shannon, why did she have to die in such a horrible way? Forget about the manner of her death. It was nothing more than bad luck. You're right. It was nothing more than bad luck. They both fell silent once again. Kanan's expression was filled with grief. To think that Shana-chan's actually dead. I still can't believe it. Poor thing. Not being able to see her again feels like a lie. I just wanted to see her smiling face one more time. Kumasawa spoke with her back facing them. After all, Kumasawa hadn't seen Shana's corpse, so she had no trouble mentioning Shana's face. When Kanan heard those words, it reminded him again of how only half of Shana's face had been left, and his grieving expression twisted even further. Why did Beatrice-sama do that to Shannon? If she wanted a sacrifice, there were plenty of others to choose from. Why? It was nothing more than bad luck. If we were less lucky, you or I might have been lying there instead of Shannon. Or it could have been someone else entirely. Everything is left to fate. Genji-sama, you said the door to Madame's room was stained with traces of something like blood, right? The same substance that was painted on the shutter? Indeed. It was an unsettling mark, almost as though someone with blood-stained fingers had been trying to pull at the doorknob. No, scratch through the door. That sort of unpleasant mark. So does this mean Beatrice-sama came to visit Madame's room and tried to open the door, but couldn't? Genji thought back to the time he'd seen those traces of blood on the door to Natsu's room, with the substance sticking to the door around the doorknob and the marks of something scratching against the door. It definitely appeared as though someone had tried to open the door but couldn't. How did the Madame avoid being chosen as a sacrifice? If only she'd been chosen, Shannon wouldn't have had to die. Just then, a loud sharp noise came in from the hall. Both of them turned around, surprised. That's a pretty interesting chat you're having there. Let me join in too. Before any of the servants realized it, Battler was standing in the doorway to the kitchen. Battler-sama, how rude of us. Genji-san and Kanikuni stood up, surprised, and hastily bowed. But I didn't care about stuff like that. I was more concerned with continuing the discussion. I told them I was going to the bathroom, so they let me go. I thought I'd suffocate if I was locked up in that room any longer. I was about to come ask you guys for some water, but then I overheard something pretty interesting. You didn't need to bow your heads or anything. Please, let me hear the rest. I just know it wasn't really... I have to keep my lips wet. I've been listening to you for a while, but try to hide it now. So I'll ask directly, who is this Beatrice? She's supposed to be a witch from a kid's story, but it doesn't look that way now. Kanan-kun averted his gaze. It was obvious that he didn't want to talk about this, which only made me want to ask even more. While making an effort to smile, I grabbed the collar of his shirt. Last night, this would have been none of my business. Yet after this morning, everything's changed. Now that Dad and the rest have been killed, this is totally my business. I have the right to listen to this suspicious story, don't I? I glared into Kanan's eyes as he continued to avert his gaze in apparent pain. Since there was a big difference in our heights, Kanan had to stand on his toes and it looked like it hurt a bit. Battler-san, please let go of him. That sign isn't really hiding anything. Then you won't have any problem talking about it, right? It's lonely being out of the loop, you know. When I tried to further twist up his collar, Genji-san cut between us and spoke. In his expression were faint traces that he'd made up his mind to do something. Apparently, he had no intention of hiding it. I can tell you about it. Kanan only hesitated because you might have taken it badly, Butler-sama. Hesitating, huh? Not very manly of you. Whatever it is you're talking about, it's even more unpleasant having it kept a secret. Tell me about it. It's not like we have anything better to do before tomorrow comes. A slightly spooky story might be the best way to avoid getting bored. Genji-san and Kanan Cook looked at each other, then nodded as though they decided to talk. Understood. Please ask us anything. We will talk. Right. Then I'll ask. Who in the world is Beatrice? All I know is that she's a witch who lives in the forest of Rokenjima. I've heard it's a story grandmother or someone invented to keep people out of the dangerous forest. Is that wrong? No, it isn't wrong. It's as you say. Beatrice is a witch who dwells in the forest of Rokenjima. Butler-sama, I don't expect you to believe this all of a sudden, but Beatrice-sama exists. She is a real person, the one who gave Master a vast amount of gold, and who worked by his side for many years. Huh? Come on. Is grandfather paying you to repeat everything he says? I laughed like it was a joke, but neither Genji-san nor Kanan-kun laughed. Not even Kumasawa-chan, who was avoiding my eyes, flustered as she started washing the dishes. So unfortunately, I was the only one laughing. Painfully, bitterly. I see. That's why Genji-san refused to mention it. If you really mean it, of course I'd take it badly. So you're saying that a person named Beatrice actually exists? Yes. She's been working for the Master since before the mansion was built on this island. She has most likely been working for him even longer than I have. What do you know? Kiryu-san's theory was off. Grandfather really did have a confidant called Beatrice. Is that person on the island now? Yes. I believe that she is here. That's a vague way to say it. I guess that means you haven't seen her face today or yesterday. That is correct. It is extremely difficult to say, but, Kanan-kun once again dropped his gaze, avoiding my eyes. Come on, don't just stop there. That's like freezing an inch before the blow, right? I urged him on jokingly again. However, it looked like Kanan was still confused as to whether or not he should speak. Then Kumasawa-chan whispered. Oh ho ho, you cannot see her face, because Beatrice-sama has no form. She has no... What did you say? Beatrice-sama has no body. Therefore, unless Beatrice-sama wishes it, common people like us are not able to see her form. I've heard that the portrait shows what Beatrice-sama looked like back when she had a human form. It seems he yearned for that figure so much, he would often stand in front of that portrait. Oh ho ho. Beatrice-sama sometimes shows herself by changing her form into glittering butterflies. On the rare occasion that you spot them somewhere in the mansion, there is a rule that you absolutely mustn't chase after them. It is whispered that you will meet with disaster if you do. In fact, there was a servant who broke that rule and quit because of great injury. Wait a sec, are you kidding me? Are you all serious about this? Butler-sama, Beatrice-sama has already arrived. Such language may be unwise. Beatrice-sama does not like it when she's profaned. If you doubt her existence, you will surely meet with disaster. Butler-san, you probably find this topic unpleasant, but you know what? Beatrice-sama does exist. She exists. Beatrice-sama hates people who doubt that. Can't you tell, Butler-sama? Beatrice-sama has already arrived here. Come on, quit it. I'm weak against that stuff. Enough with the cheap threats. However, there was no trace of a joke in the eyes of the three servants. On the surface, I laughed and tried to look unconcerned, but I was quickly starting to sober up. Their eyes were also sobering up fast. Butler-san, I beg that you stop profaning Beatrice-sama. Please trust me. Kumasawa-chan, who is usually cheerful and would always teach people, now spoke with a totally serious face. But, well, even if you say she exists, I don't see anything. You're trying to say she's standing right next to me or something? Quit joking around. Hehehehe. Just then, that unnerving laugh suddenly filled the kitchen. When I turned around, Mario was standing there by the entrance. But her expression and the feeling about her, her presence, looked exactly the same as the servants. Whether your wavelength matches or not is determined at birth. Battler, you were born with a mismatched wavelength. That's why you can't see her. That's why you can't meet with her. And that's why you can't talk to her. Hehehe. You're the type Beatrice hates the most. Mario laughed like it was funny, but it sounded extremely eerie. It was almost like she was laughing at me because I alone didn't understand. Hey, Junka. Yeah, Mario's gotten into it today. It's started. It really has started. Do you want to know about Beatrice? Beatrice is a 1,000-year-old witch. With all the demons at her command, she can harness the power of alchemy to create the Philosopher's Stone and a vast quantity of gold. Grandfather built up all the vast wealth of the Yoshimura family by making a contract with her. Yesterday, I read Beatrice's letter, didn't I? That was real. Well, I guess it's pointless for me to try and force you to believe. After all, it looks like you were born without a trace of the sixth sense. Hehehe. What are you talking about? Witches? Demons? Who told you about that? Hehehe. I heard it from Beatrice herself. Hehehe. Moria kept doing that unpleasant laugh. However, the servants who watched over this didn't even blink. She heard it from that witch in the portrait adorning the entrance hall. Moria kept on laughing in a weird voice, as though this was nothing more or less than the truth. Maria, it might be rude to ask, but I'll ask one more time, okay? You gave me that letter yesterday. I got it from Beatrice. How many times must I tell you before you understand? You don't get it, do you? You can't see it. You can't believe it, can you? Hehehehe. Just then, Maria's laughter suddenly stopped. Battler, you still don't understand? Beatrice Sama exists. She exists, you say, but where? Like I said, Beatrice Sama exists here. That's right. Now that I think about it, I've been feeling for a while now that the servant's eyes haven't been pointed in quite the right direction. See, the thing is, assuming they're using... I can actually just check. Yep. Okay, so the thing is here, the reason that's in quotes is because the verb for to exist is the same as the verb for to be here in Japanese. So when they're saying she exists, they're actually saying she is right here in the room. That's right. Now that I think about it, I've been feeling for a while now that the servant's eyes haven't been pointed in quite the right direction. I'd figured they were just staring absent-mindedly, but that wasn't the case. The four here, Genji-san, Kanen-kun, Kurosawa-san, and Maria, everyone except me, was looking at a spot right behind me. Holding my breath tightly, I slowly looked over my shoulder. Of course, there wasn't anyone there. I've known that the whole time. However, everyone in the room except me was focusing on the point, as if there was someone there. Beatrice is the mighty golden witch who has lived for 1,000 years. But since she can't show her form to humans of the wrong wavelength, she can't talk to them. And you know what? That's really sad. It means she truly despises it when people like you, who are born without a fragment of the ability needed to sense magic, deny that she exists. You're lucky, Battler. Good thing I gave you that charm yesterday, right? Can't you realize what kind of curse Beatrice would have put on you by now, if you hadn't been carrying it around? You really are a lucky, Battler. Hehehe. As a god to an unbeliever, it really is. That's honestly kind of like a telling line. You know the whole thing in Toho, where like, gods only have as much power as they have faith. That's going to be kind of a recurring theme here in Umineko as well. Whether or not someone believes in the witch. Oh, that scorpion keychain. I thought that was just some cheap gift or something. But are you saying that it really had some power? Hehehe. If it weren't for that, you'd be lying in that storehouse as a sacrifice with your face crushed by now. Hehehe, you're so lucky, Battler. Hehehe. I see. So if it weren't for that, I'd have been killed by now. I need to just, like, get a soundboard so I can, like, play a clip of, like, a Mario laugh or something like that, so I don't have to do it every time. Battler, why don't you believe in Beatrice, even though she exists? Right now, over there, look. Hehehe. Hey, I'll bet you want to believe it now. Believe it, and thank me for giving you that charm. If it weren't for that, you'd be in the storehouse right now. But then, maybe you would have saved someone else in exchange, right? Hehehe. Right then, I burst into laughter. Playing witches had been pretty fun up until a second ago, but unfortunately, that last one seemed to be too good for me to... too much for me to gloss over. It's like the Ace Attorney pursuit theme coming in here. Hahaha. Then it's all useless, isn't it, Maria? If that's true, then I'm sorry, but it's all useless. When Maria saw me suddenly start laughing, she stopped. Even though she didn't understand what I was laughing at, she realized it wouldn't be pleasant for her. I thought it might hurt you, so I didn't say it earlier, but... well, I thought I'd put that charm you gave me in my pocket, but I must have dropped it somewhere. So the charm can't be the only reason I'm alive now. Even though I should have been cursed by the witch, I'm perfectly fine. Sorry, but I don't believe in things I don't see with my own eyes. Sixth senses? Wavelengths? Magic sensitivity? Sorry, but I don't believe in fake stuff like that. When I hear the girls in class start talking about how good or bad their ability to sense the supernatural is, it pisses me off. I don't know how much grandfather's paying you, but if you're trying to talk me to joining some cult, believe me, you won't be able to do it that easily. Battler-sama, you guys are free to believe whatever you want. However, when it comes to the things I believe, the one who decides is always me. Sorry, but I can't believe in something as shady as Beatrice until I've seen it with my own eyes. I spoke forcefully and sharply. Then, Maria started cackling again. Hehehe. Well, that's just fine, isn't it? Eventually, even people like you with totally mismatched wavelengths will be able to see Beatrice. Very soon, she will revive. Beatrice will revive. Once that happens, she's promised to talk with me and play with me a lot. There will be absolutely no need for you to doubt, or for you to force you to believe, or for us to force you to believe. She will appear very soon. Hehehehe. The Scorpion Charm stuff is something to think about and remember. After a meal, some people tend to head to the bathroom, while others prefer to relax for a bit. I usually go nap. It seemed that several people had left the parlor, just like I did when I went to the kitchen to drink some water. In the end, Aunt Nazi reluctantly retracted her order that everyone remained packed in the parlor, on the condition that no one headed out on their own or strayed too far. In any case, if 11 people are shut up in the same room starting early in the morning, the air will start to stagnate. Also, quite some time had passed, so everyone was starting to recover from the shock of that morning, and their sense of danger might have been weakening too. However, it was a certain fact that 6 people had been killed inside this mansion. No, that was outside the mansion, in the storehouse. So no one was completely negligent. So whenever they... Well, I guess they were killed inside, brought out. Yeah, okay, whatever, fine. So whenever they went out in the hallway, for a breath of fresh air, trying to act tough, they would quickly get scared of standing. Careful, please. Scared of standing there, isolated, and would eventually return to the parlor. I guess it's like the north wind and the sun. If you force someone to stay shut in, they'll resist, but if you tell them to do whatever they want, they'll come back immediately. People really do like not doing what they're told. When the servants finished cleaning up from the meal, they returned obediently to the parlor, just as Aunt Natsu had told them to, and sat on a sofa near the entrance, patiently waiting orders. Maria, almost as though she'd suddenly finished playing witches, had returned to the pure Maria I knew well, saying, "Ooh. What in the world happened back there? I hadn't felt even an atom of the presence of this person called Beatrice, who was supposedly standing behind me, invisible. However, it felt like I'd glimpsed a little of that presence inside Maria. You're right. When Maria starts talking about witches, her personality changes. Balor-kun, you also saw it down by the beach yesterday, right? You mean that scorpion keychain? No, I don't mean like when her feelings are hurt. I'm talking about her having a dual personality or something. Yeah, that happens sometimes too. That thing Maria did when she was talking about the magic circle does happen every now and again. It's freaky though. Apparently Jessica had spotted that kihihi Maria a few times. I just happened to catch it at a bad moment, and was pretty freaked out seeing it for the first time. So what is that? Does Maria have a dual personality or something? Or you're saying that her spiritual sense really is that strong, and she's being possessed by a spirit or whatever? No, I don't think it's that. Haven't you ever experienced it? When you were small, didn't you ever want to be someone other than yourself? When humans are born, no one has any individuality. However, when they reach their growth period, their sense of self starts to be born. They want to be different from other people. But since everyone else in their class is wanting the same things at the same rate, and being forced into the same lifestyle, of course they aren't going to find anything that makes them different from everyone else around them. Once they realize that, the first thing they do is start breaking the rules in what's called the rebellious stage. Since everyone else follows the rules, they want to show off their individuality by breaking them. So even those who try to act tough, mocking everyone around them and calling them childish, can actually be viewed as cute kids searching for themselves if you look at it this way. Well, I'm lecturing about all this like I'm smart, but I actually got a second hand from George Aniki. I myself was one of those embarrassing guys who thought it was cool to act like a little bastard. Well, that was when I was at a young age where you try to show off for the opposite sex. He's still kind of a little bastard. The main feature of the growing period lies in an impulse to break away from your life as a kid, like a chick trying to crack open the shell of their egg. Do you know what makes children and adults different? Age? Or do you mean size? No, it's experience. Adults can look down on children because children have very little life experience. The reason they snort at everything children say is because they think kids know nothing about the real world. Yeah, I understand that. When you're a kid, you talk like you've got life all figured out somehow, trying to act like an adult. No matter what kids say, adults just snort at them and say they're too naive, or that they'll understand when they get older, or something. Well, it's probably true, but to a kid, it's annoying, like they're being looked down upon. I get it. It's a question of knowledge and experience. Now, I guess you're right that there's no reason to respect a person for their age if they've just wasted their lives. Therefore, during the period when they try to separate themselves from other children, they also try to take on personality traits different from those around them. And if knowledge and experience is what separates kids and adults, I get it. If they know something no one else knows, it becomes part of their identity. You know, when I was in elementary school, I'd learn things no one else knew, get things no one else had, wear things no one else wore, and became a bit of a hero for it. I bet you've done the same thing, Valor. Yeah. There was definitely an age when I wanted to sound some skill or other. I see, so that's because I was trying to separate myself from being a child, or going through my growing period, in other words. If you put a positive spin on it, the growing period forces you to separate yourself from others, thereby pushing you to gain skills and knowledge no one else has. This is also interesting from a sociological standpoint. Because people hate being like everyone else, they'll try to learn skills other people don't know. In this way, society can acquire the broad range of skills it needs to survive. Good thing we have people this smart here to make conversations boring like this. The quality of the gods' programming is truly surprising. It's really not bad every now and again, but there tends to be a lot of it. A little bit like Zero Escape, honestly. Has everyone heard of this, like, concept? Who here has heard of the Monty Hall problem? We just get into a big debate. Well, unique personality traits can also be negative, right? Like if, say, everyone in the class was studying hard, but I was the only one slacking off trying to stand out. Okay, that last bit really was true about me. It's only recently that I'm able to thank the middle school teacher who slapped me after school. I know, I mean, it sounds like it makes sense to me. I don't know how much of, like, this is based in real-life studies. I would assume the majority of it is, though. The author writes like he sounds like he knows what he's talking about, at least. If anything, I'll probably give my thoughts more in debates and stuff about facts regarding the cases and things that happen. I, of course, like, know the truth behind a lot of that stuff, but there's also little bits here and there I've forgotten, so I might kind of point things out, but I need to do my best to not spoil things by doing so. It could be a bit tricky. Past episode 1, we get a lot more, what's the word? There's always this thing I can think of how to say in Japanese, but not in English. A lot more concrete and precise in how we talk about the crimes. But things are still kind of getting figured out in episode 1. Some parts of Umineko don't really kick in until 2 and onwards. And you don't... Well, I'm not going to say anything, actually. Let me cut off that sentence there. Okay, that last bit really was true about me. It's only recently that I'm able to thank the middle teacher who slapped me after school. But, well, I'd try to jump over things no one else could, sprint as fast as I could, trying to lap those guys with good grades when we did a marathon. I just felt like doing it. Yeah, definitely think about the epitaph. I mean, let's go back over the epitaph real quick. The characters will probably do so at one point anyway. Specifically this part. Sits chosen by the key of sacrifices. Surprisingly, no one has paid attention to this and, like, brought it up yet. But it's obviously kind of, suspicious. You come back and you see Kinzo dead? No, he's not dead. He's just missing. We just don't know where the hell he is. He's gone on a walk in the typhoon because he's bored, I guess. We do know. The other 6 are dead, though, obviously. You haven't missed anything. Besides the servants insisting that Beatrice is real. So we have a lot of people who say that Beatrice is real, Maria, as well as the 3 servants that are still here. It was in my nature that if I couldn't study well, then I at least could get back at them by exercising. I see, so I really did go through a proper growing period. I guess boys really do tend to focus more on physical stuff. But you know, girls of the same age tend to focus more on mental, spiritual things. I'll bet there were groups of girls in your classes that got really interested in fortune-telling and their spiritual senses. Yeah, there were. They'd come over asking me for my sign and my blood type. Then they'd laugh. I thought so, hee. You really got on my nerves. No matter which class you go to, girls like fortune-telling. Deciding whether your spirit sense is strong or weak, what your sensitivity is, whether you can see the unseeable. That kind of thing definitely happened to me. There were girls in my school who would, like, make these little, like, fortune-telling paper things. God, those seem like they'd be a pain in the ass to make. They're like little folding, almost like flower things that, like, you kind of like go shoom with. You like flip over a thing and it has something written on it. And you could, like, write what you want on all the flaps. I don't know what they're called. And I haven't seen one of those in, like, 20 years or more now. Yeah, over 20 years. But, those are certainly a thing in my childhood. I think some of my cousins knew how to make them too. Okay. I mean, I see a lot of, like, cardinal directions in there. I don't remember what they were called. I'll look it up real quick. There's definitely a term for it, right? Fortune telling, flower, paper. Paper fortune teller. Yeah. It's these guys. I don't know what they're called, but it is these, yes. Yeah, see, in Japanese, East is different. Origami fortune telling, yeah. Here's what they look like, basically. So you see there's like 4 places for numbers to be written there. If you like unfold it differently, then there's 4 like on the other sides, the other faces that you can't see there. Yeah, these things were definitely popular in my school. Small Christian school, so everyone was bored out of their minds. Nothing to do. We used to write funny stuff like water supply runs out tonight. I don't remember what kind of stuff was on ours. Remember like names or something? I assume as much. I also remember this thing. This is something that one of my cousins did. It's like this like love compatibility thing. I think you'd like take 2 people's names and like run some kind of like almost like equation over them or something with like the letters and come up with a number. I don't remember how any of this worked. I think I have a notebook in my closet from my childhood that still has 1 or 2 of those written in it. How the hell to find that stuff now, though? Actually. Maybe in here. No, it's not. This is actually, my journal from 2008. We were forced to keep journals in high school every day. So this is like a year's worth of like random journal writing. It smells like... God, why is it? It smells like 40-year-old stuff here. Oh, no, it's this. My adhesive remover spilled in there, or leaked out, apparently. I got this to, like, get shit off of NES cartridges that I was cleaning off a year or 2 ago. This was supposed to be, like, nearly full. Apparently this has spilled and dried in there. I'm gonna go... I'll just put this somewhere. Hold on. Okay. Anyway, let's see. Yeah, isn't it? Okay. Yeah, I thought that was maybe one of those childhood notebooks, but it's not. It's a high school one. I'd have to look in my closet. Oh well. So unfortunately, that line can only go that far. I'll have to find that stuff. There's some stuff that is probably too embarrassing from my childhood that I wouldn't want to show off, but there's some stuff that I could. But I think the worst thing, and I found this a few years ago, was a note that said "I am Kira" in Japanese that I'd written like during Death Note fad years. And it was like just hid inside something, like a backpack or a drawer or something, like a tiny thing I found in the closet that I'd like carried over from my childhood. Let's come in. A few houses through now. I have a lot of print stuff like that. I have adhesive removal stuff in my hand now. That's because fortune telling and spiritual senses are things that aren't taught in schools. To girls who tend to be more introverted, it's a genre that's easy to build an identity upon, and one that holds a lot of interest for them. Just like how, when boys enter their growing period, they start acting tough and rebel against adults. When girls enter the growing period, they start getting interested in that kind of thing. Well, I didn't though. So Moria having so much interest in the occult isn't that rare among girls her age? I think that really is true, but she's a little bit too into it. The whole learning Hebrew and being able to replicate magic circles and quote the Bible, a little bit too far. A little bit too far. Even if we accept that, I wonder if it explains that creepy dual personality thing. Actually, I think I probably could accept that explanation more or less. As we just said, becoming an adult means getting knowledge and experience. So to gain that, it's necessary for children to learn all sorts of things and break free from childhood. However, there are certain convenient delusions that you see often in the world of children, both now and in the past. Do you know what I mean? You see it all the time in manga and anime, right? It's kind of like that. Like you've got memories from a previous life that start to resurface. Like you're being possessed by the soul of something or whatever. I went through this as a child. I won't get into super detail about it. But I had I definitely thought I was like, all right. I don't want to talk about that. Or it could be that a sleeping gene gets awakened, or maybe a sealed power and memory returns. There's all kinds. For some reason, stuff like that's really popular at that age. Why is that? All those examples you've just mentioned are illusions that let children immediately add to their sum of knowledge and experience. If a 9-year-old girl says she has a 1,000-year-old witch possessing her, then she gains a 1,009-year-old identity. So basically, studying is annoying. But these delusions are convenient for people who want to brag about having a skill no one else has, amazing the people around them. Oh, I definitely tried to, like, convince people in elementary school that I had, like, psychic powers or magical powers, or could see stuff that wasn't there. Absolutely. So you can brag about something without having to work hard or study. And see, isn't that a kid's greatest dream? Furthermore, in their desire to separate themselves from being kids, they also project an image of their ideal self. And it's not rare for that desire itself to become an alternate personality. Even you, Ballerkun, probably had a slightly different personality at home and at school, right? It'd probably be embarrassing if your friends at school saw how you were at home. At school, you try to project yourself as you want to be, but home is where you're your true self. I mean, I had a classmate that said he could go Super Saiyan, but he never did it. So, it's not like I was alone there, I don't think. Cool. Pretty bot Noita. Hell yeah. So in other words, I'm changing my personality depending on the situation. Are you trying to say having multiple personalities is actually really common? A girl who's offended the occult might say she's being possessed or awakened. Honestly, there are some kids who change their personality so much it's creepy. And some boys do it too, right? Guys who say they on their top and suddenly turn into some overplayed violent character. I'll bet they think it's pretty cool, but it's painful to watch. Let's sum this all up. So you're saying that even if a girl about Mari's age shows a creepy second personality, like she did a minute ago, it isn't such a rare and unusual thing? Simply put, that's right. Identity is an important factor when building up one's sense of self. If you make fun of it, it could actually cause children to go back into their shells. So it's important to go along with them to some degree. Although the broad-mindedness of the parent determines whether they play along in full or not. Now see, I can get that, I can get behind that. But the fact that she actually knows real things. If she were like saying, oh, I know this, it's like that pretend language, or like she lies and like she doesn't know what the Hebrew says, but she makes something up that she thinks would convince people or would be fitting. That is perfectly fine. But the fact that she actually knows this stuff is what's really concerning to me. Aniki, I can't believe you're single. You sound like you've already raised kids through middle school. So I wonder if Aunt Rosa also knew much about Maria's dual personality. She knew about it. Just between us, Aunt Rosa really hated it. She said it was unpleasant and that Maria was becoming increasingly isolated from the rest of the class. So anytime Maria started talking about the occult or laughing at like a witch, she'd slap her. And it looks like Maria stopped talking that way in front of her. She didn't stop the ooh though. Maybe that thing back there was just a little game from a girl facing her growing period. Just a girl trying to show that she was different and independent by holding interest in witches and the occult. Or maybe it's her way of grieving. And since she wanted to be different from herself, young as she was switching between her normal personality and the personality of her ideal, a witch. After all, if she's like a 1,009-year-old witch, like her life is so long she wouldn't really care about her mother dying, right? At first I'd found that very disturbing, but after being lectured to by George Anarchy, it felt like this was a path everyone walked down at one time or another. I haven't told anyone, but when I was in kindergarten, I joined up with a little gang of kids trying to form an Earth Defense Force, saying we'd help protect peace on Earth. My face turns red when I remember how, during what we called battle practice, we would chant EDF, EDF. It's amazing. I remember in elementary school, I was playing Wild Arms 2 at the time, and there's like factions in that game. Like I think there's arms and there's like another faction. I don't remember much of anything about that game, besides a very specific song and a couple of the characters. But essentially, like, I made all the kids in the school like join like one of the teams and whatnot, that kind of thing, and we like pretend to be enemies or allies. Just like usual, Mori was relaxing, immersed in the TV, ooh-ooing and laughing just like any girl her age. But on the inside, another personality, that of the ideal which she respected and blindly accepted, was sleeping. But that wasn't anything extraordinary. It was perfectly natural for a girl of her age. It's probably a good thing that I didn't get into Touhou until I was like 16 or so, around there. Because if I somehow discovered Touhou at 10, and I don't know if I would have liked it at 10, because it's so different, like, from everything else at that age, but it definitely would have, like, given me a lot of cringe memories, for sure. I've calmed down a little. To be fair, talking to anyone in high school about Touhou is kind of a cringe memory, too. It's hard to get people into that. The shock from my bizarre experience in the kitchen just now is fading away. If I hadn't talked to Anaki and Jessica, I might still be frightened by the idea that an invisible witch is standing right behind me. However, can I really accept that as an explanation for what happened back there? If it had just been Moria, I could have explained it as the fickle delusions of a growing girl. But Genji-san, Kanen-kun, and Kumasawa Bachan had also been there. None of them had denied what Moria said. They silently accepted that Beatrice exists. I was starting to feel a little uneasy. Adeba's position was that no 19th person existed, that the crime was an inside job tied to the family quarrels. On the other hand, Natsui's position was that the culprit was hiding somewhere outside the mansion. So she rejected the possibility of an inside job and supported the idea that a 19th person existed. And in the kitchen, Moria and the servants had also supported the idea of a 19th person. But according to them, this 19th person isn't human. They said it was an invisible witch carrying out some mysterious plan. Is there a 19th person or not? And is the culprit human or a witch? For some reason, I couldn't just laugh off any of those possibilities. Not even the most ridiculous story about the witch. Everyone watching should start, like, theorizing, like, guessing how many people are on the island. Even if you're not confident, just to see if your answer lines up later on. Though it's going to be a while. It's going to be a point of contention for a while. Jessica, all I know about the story of the witch is that the adults made it up to keep the kids too scared to enter the forest. But is the story different here in the mansion? I feel the same way you do, okay? I think it was just a stupid ghost story that parents made up so that kids would listen to them. But I can't deny that the atmosphere inside the mansion makes it a little hard to say it out loud. After all, Grandfather has proclaimed that Beatrice exists. And because of their position, the servants can't doubt that. Even Uncle Kraus and Aunt Natsui don't want to get into a fight with him, so in the surface they go along with it. So it's probably fair to say that doubting the existence of Beatrice is taboo to those who live and work in this mansion. Unlike the rest of us, who only come here once a year. Is that right? Jessica took a deep breath in admiration. Looked like Anaki had guessed right. It's just like you say, no one really believes it on the inside, but on the outside, they accept that she exists. See, it's just like the way some people are about God. Even if they know God doesn't exist, they feel like it'd be uncouth if they actually said it out loud. How do you think the servants feel about it? Are they just going along with it because Grandfather, their employer, said that she exists? Well, I don't really know the details. But between the servants, the story about Beatrice has been treated like a sort of ghost story. Junko says a 19th person exists. Okay, it's good to see that someone, I want to see both people on both sides, which is really nice. That person isn't human, do they count? When we say person... Oh god, the definition of person in this. I'm gonna let the game get into that. Let's say a non-human doesn't count, though. If we have, like, a ghost, or we have, like, a werewolf or something like that, no. They don't count. But I can't talk too much about the definition of person without showing you that really long alternate theory video. Well, yeah, Mima's a person in the sense that she's a character. You know, maybe you should think of it like character. How many characters are there on the island instead of person? That might be a better way in general of coming about this reasoning, like coming at it. Remember yesterday when Shannon was talking to us down by the beach? That story about how one night, when she was doing the rounds in the mansion, she saw something unsettling? She did say something like that, didn't she? Back then, I thought she was just being really nice to help improve Maria's mood, but it felt like she was serious when she said it. That's right, she definitely said it. See, here's the thing. For anyone who doesn't know about Umineko, there's a thing called the red text. Anything said in red is a fact. Undoubtable fact. We're going to be getting into that in episode 2 and onwards. So there is where we're going to be able to start figuring out, okay, we have a line of text here. Exactly what does everything in this line mean? Exactly how can we use this as a rule to dictate what's going on here? That kind of thing. And I'll probably check out the Japanese for a lot of the red text too, since that'll be nice to be able to refer back and forth to see if there's any differences. But that's not going to come up in episode 1 at all, unfortunately. That's right, she definitely said it. She definitely said the same kind of thing that Genji and the rest had all unanimously declared back in the kitchen. In addition, some servants have also seen will-o'-the-wisps and glittering butterflies dancing around. Penninkud also saw something like that when he went patrolling one night. And recently, you often hear servants talking about strange footsteps heard inside the mansion near midnight. We whispered together that the Beatrice summoned the portrait, sometimes makes herself invisible, and walks through the mansion. It happened a while ago, but even I have heard footsteps while patrolling at night that resemble these stories. Well, no, I'd say it's good to write stuff down, just don't look anything up. Don't type the word Umineko into Google, even if it's to check something you already know. Because you know how Google is, it's going to auto-suggest, like, Umineko did X do X, or X character death, or whatever. Like, things like that, you know? Like, if you type Final Fantasy VII Aerith, you know what you're going to get, you know? If you type Dumbledore, you know what you're going to get. But you don't know that you might get that for some characters, so you don't want to see that. I've had people do that with Danganronpa before. Funny. They wanted to look up something. They wanted to just find a picture of a character so they could check their hair color in paint. And they typed in their name into Google, and the first thing it suggested was death. Rudolph's quote is something interesting, actually. There's a couple ways to interpret that. Rudolph's quote is something really intriguing. I don't know if I should comment on it, but at the same time, I forget if the game ever really draws much attention to it. I don't think it does. You've come up with a theory. Alright, let's hear it. I think you probably figured out what most people think it means. Now keep in mind, I am coming at Umineko, like, with knowledge of a lot of things, because I finished it before. But there's definitely a lot of things I've forgotten, so some bits and pieces here I can't necessarily, like, comment on the absolute truth of. Anyway, I'll keep going for now. That's right, she definitely said that. Exactly the same thing that I'd been told just now. But there's nothing to be afraid of. Beatrice-sama is another ruler of this mansion, separate from the master, so there's no need to be unnaturally afraid. If you respect her, I hear she won't do anything bad. However, she can be quite terrifying if you don't respect her, right? Like if you don't believe in her. Correct. I've heard that just before I began working here. Someone who spoke badly about Beatrice-sama fell down the stairs and quit after receiving a large injury to their back. Because of that, there was a rumor between the servants that Beatrice-sama's anger had been brought down upon this person. If you don't respect her, you'll suffer her wrath and get hurt. So to the servants, Beatrice's existence is just as credible as the story that if you pull pranks on Inari-san, you'll receive Kitsune-sama's curse. Of course, even though everyone accepts that curses and the like don't exist in the modern era, people are still afraid and still have a little respect for them. You often see it when, in a residential area, someone is building a house, and they call a Shinto priest for a ceremony to honor the god of that plot of land. He believes in the witch and likely assumed he'd be killed because perhaps he might have figured out things as it were. Dude's analytical as fuck. No way he didn't think about it. It's a theory. I don't know if I should comment on it now because I forget if... I'm just gonna Google something real quick on the side. Hold on. Right. Okay. I should avoid talking about it until later. Okay. Because I forgot there is something. Alright. Let's move on, let's move on. Just trust me. You might think that was just a big waste of time and money, but it is said that if the workers don't do that, a big accident will occur, so they never neglect to do it. You also hear about how, if an Inari shrine is carelessly moved during a time of replanning, there'd be a curse by Kitsune-sama. I think I might have read somewhere that when the occupying forces were trying to expand an airport, they tried to remove an Inari-san that got in the way. I'm just going to say this. Think about different ways that you can interpret I'm going to be killed tonight. Someone's going to kill me tonight. Think about different ways you can interpret that. The workers kept getting struck down by mysterious fevers. Even in modern cities like Tokyo, it wasn't rare to see modern buildings packed all around an old Inari shrine, leaving the shrine itself untouched. And this wasn't limited to Japan. It's probably similar to how foreigners baptize babies. If I remember right, by Christian doctrine, if unbaptized souls have even the slightest amount of sin, they will still go to hell. That's Catholic doctrine. That's not Christian doctrine. Well, I guess maybe it depends on your denomination of Christian. Putting water on a child's forehead doesn't do anything but make them cry. But if by doing just that, parents can prevent their children from going to hell, they will happily go through with that ceremony. In short, even in this modern society of reason, we were still unable to throw away every trace of belief and fear. You could even say that we accept certain sorts of supernatural things, though in a passive way. Maybe the only difference on this island is that Beatrice is the object of that worship. So in other words, if anything happens that doesn't seem explainable in human terms, it's called the work of Beatrice. I think Shauna-chan said it herself. Windows and doors and locks that were tightly shut would be opened the next time you went to check them. Lights that should have been on went out, and lights that should have been out were turned on. And if I remember, even Jessica was joking about it, saying it was also the work of Beatrice when she couldn't find her bag in the morning. Your memory's pretty good. Normally you'd say some little imps took them, but in this island, it's Beatrice. Well, it's all pretty stupid though. This mansion has been standing for about 30 years by now, hasn't it? It's natural for things that old to get their fair share of ghosts and occult stories. Like the 7 mysteries at a school. But that's where I'll spin the chessboard around. Huh? Simply put, on this island, there's a rule that Beatrice gets blamed for anything that couldn't have been done by humans. Things that humans can't do. How many humans are here? 18. In other words, the culprit is using the rules of this island to make it look like a witch committed this crime. Which proves that they desperately want us to think a 19th person did it. I don't like it. I don't like it one bit. What do you mean you don't like it? Let's assume some invisible 19th person exists and wants people to know they exist. If it were me, I'd do it with even more perfect timing. What do you mean by perfect timing? Well, the crime took place sometime between the middle of the night and dawn, right? We had some people who were talking together until the middle of the night. Some people on night shifts, and some people who had returned to their rooms and were sleeping. Everyone's alibi is really vague, so there's plenty of room to suspect that the crime was an inside job. Janaki, on tape, probably told you too, right? that there's a good chance this crime was an inside job? Yes, I guess. In other words, if this invisible 19th person really exists and wants to let us know it, this first crime was a complete failure. Yeah, he's talking really interesting stuff here. This is definitely something to think about. No, in the first place, they chose the wrong time of day to do it. If this invisible 19th person really wanted to show themselves, they had to make sure that the crime took place under conditions which proved that the remaining 12 people were all innocent. So, when people actually have an alibi, or like during dinner or something, like a time where everyone's location and alibi is known. Which isn't the case. They picked like the time where, like the exact opposite time of that. As long as there's a single human we can suspect, this 19th person's attempt to highlight their presence fails. That's why near midnight, when everyone's alibis are at their vaguest, the 19th person's existence is also at its vaguest. And yet, the culprit chose to commit the crime at that time. By committing the crime then, one of the 18 would obviously be suspected. And yet, someone handed Mori the letter and called themselves a witch, even though everyone denies they did it. In other words, you're trying to say that one of the 18 is trying to make it look like a 19th person called Beatrice exists. That's a pretty crazy idea. I think Mom's theory about someone hiding outside the mansion is a bit more credible. Battler, don't tell me you actually think someone in this room is the culprit. I do. Someone's trying to force us to accept that Beatrice exists. That's right, this whole thing started as far back as the letter last night. I don't have any basis of proof, but with the chessboard turned around, this is my best guess. Seriously? That's too crazy. You sure you haven't been reading too many weird detective novels? However, it's an angle we can't ignore. Whether there's a 19th person or not, the culprit's definitely planning something involving that rule about this island. Just now, listening to Battler Quinn talk, I remembered something that's a little disturbing. Something disturbing? Yes. Do you remember Beatrice's letter? It said that Beatrice was going to collect interest. By interest, it mentioned everything of the Ushimura family. Jessica and I thought back on what Mori had read aloud the previous night. Yeah, it said that. It definitely said that. That the collection of the interest was going to take place shortly, but if the riddle of the gold could be solved, she'd lose that right. Grandfather received the gold and rebuilt the Ushimura family. In other words, according to Beatrice, everything created using the gold as capital counts as part of the interest. Which means... That's pretty scary for a joke, Aniki. You don't mean everything of the Ushimura family. In other words, everything that grandfather gave birth to? In other words, everyone who has grandfather's blood flowing through their veins? If you interpret the letter that way, these murders are just Beatrice legitimately collecting interest. If that's the case, these crimes will continue. Because the collection of interest is still only halfway completed. Doors still around, looking over the parlor. There are still many people who held the name Ushimiya. Because Goto-san and Shana-chan had been killed, we know that not even the servants were safe, despite lacking the Ushimiya name. And we even lost Kirie, who married into the family, so yeah. Not too picky, apparently. I just want to get water, use the bathroom. I'll be right back, and we'll continue. I'd say overthinking things is a healthy part of Umineko. You never know if you're overthinking or thinking just the right amount. So definitely let your thinking run wild. Hi, Captain. This water, you're gonna be there. Good boy. Good boy. He really gets into it if you give him chin scratches. Like, side of the face scratches. He's got these big jowls. He's got one of these faces. And he loves it. He loves it, don't you? But that's... So, are they planning to kill us all? But that's weird, George Nissan. In that case, why only 6 people? They should have been able to kill a lot more. Can we check the epitaph? Sure. Let's read over the epitaph real quick. So... we can do this part too. Behold the sweet fish river running through my beloved hometown. You who seek the Golden Land, follow its path downstream in search of the key. As you travel down it, you will see a village. In that village, look for the shore the two will tell you of. There sleeps the key to the Golden Land. The one who obtains the key must then travel to the Golden Land in accordance with these rules. On the first twilight, offer the 6 chosen by the key as sacrifices. On the second twilight, those who remain shall tear apart the 2 horror clothes. On the third twilight, those who remain shall praise my noble name. On the fourth twilight, gouge the head and kill. On the fifth twilight, gouge the chest and kill. On the sixth twilight, gouge the stomach and kill. On the seventh twilight, gouge the knee and kill. On the 8th twilight, gouge the leg and kill. On the 9th twilight, those shall revive and none shall be left alive. On the 10th twilight, at journey's end, you shall attain to the power of the Golden Land's treasures once and for the last time. The witch shall praise the wise and bestow 4 treasures. One shall be all the gold from the Golden Land. One shall be the resurrection of all the dead souls. One shall be the resurrection of the love that is lost. That was lost. One shall be to put the witch to sleep for all time. Sleep peacefully, my beloved witch Beatrice. So we've seen the first twilight, so if whoever's in charge of these murders keeps going successfully, then we'll see this, I guess. They're going to maybe kill 2 people. Or something like that, possibly. One sec. Slips the key to the Golden Land. You mean this key would be a person? Obtains the key must travel to the Golden Land. What's with these rules? I'm not sure I see what you're saying. I mean, so far we don't really have any way to like work this into it. We're just kind of seeing this stuff happening. Let's wonder if there's anything interesting here in particular in Japanese. Probably not. I think Sweetfish is Ayu. Ayu no kawa. Orgon kyo mezasu mono wa kore wo ite kagi o sagase. So Orgon kyo is land of gold, golden land. Kawa wo neba yagate sato ari. Kono sato ni te utari, so 2 people, ga kuchi ni shi kishi o sagare. Soku ni Orgon kyo no kagi ga nuru. Key to the Golden Land, sleeps there and whatnot. Yep, sleeps the key to the Golden Land. And I'm sure the translation is good. Yep. Offers its sacrifices. Chosen by the key, yep. Yeah, I guess that's what I say too, who are close. Beatrice. But yeah, epitaph, something to keep in mind. They should have been able to kill a lot more. At worst, it should have been possible for them to assault everyone while they were sleeping and kill them in a single night. Why didn't they just do that? The special clause. As objects don't sleep. Well, I mean, you can say that like something sleeps like somewhere hidden, right? It doesn't have to be someone literally sleeping. Like a buried treasure lies sleeping beneath the earth. You could definitely say that. It doesn't have to be a person. The key doesn't have to be a person. In Japanese, it's also just sleep. It doesn't really imply anything specifically. Both languages can be just as flowery in that regard. The special clause. If someone manages to solve the riddle of the gold, the right to the interest will be lost. Remember how the letter ended. It challenged us all to solve the riddle of grandfather's gold. Jesus. It looks like we're finally understanding the culprit's message. In other words, the culprit's telling us to try to solve the riddle on that epitaph grandfather had made. On top of that, they're saying that if we just sit around, they'll keep collecting the interest. I realize this is all based on several guesses that are way out there. But not everything that happens in this world fits together in a perfect line. Most of the events we don't understand are only individual points. By fitting them into a straight line, we're beginning to understand. When the points at either end of the line are really close, the line itself is more logical and easier to understand. And when those points are really far away, the opposite is true. It's the distance between those points that makes us say our guesses are way out there. However, if the distances we span are too narrow, that means our thinking will be narrow too. Is there a difference between making guesses and reasoning? Am I just using easily made guesses to try and force this crime into a pattern I can understand? No, that's not it. When you're lost in the dark and searching around with your hands, what you're doing is relying on your imagination and making guesses. Only imagination can find the points that need to be tied together. Reasoning is nothing more than the act of drawing lines between them. If you can't imagine, you can't reason. What I'm doing now may be way out there, but I'm sure it isn't a mistake either. Only the power of imagination can pull clues out from the darkness. And then I can use the power of reasoning to tie those clues together. It was a lot like the process of searching out an enemy's weak spot and striking. It's okay if I'm way out there. Find a weak point first. Then we can think about how to strike. Right now is the time to find points we can tie together later. He's pretty good at this. He's pretty good at this. It's lucky that a lot of the people on this island seem to be pretty smart. Make for a pretty boring novel otherwise. For the time being, I put aside whether a 19th person existed, and announced our theory that the goal of the culprit might have been to make us solve the riddle of the epitaph. Uncle Hideyoshi seemed to be extremely interested, but Aunt Natsu said it was ridiculous and dismissed it. Of course, if you think about it that way, even that letter from yesterday makes sense. That motive seems to fit pretty well with the facts. Set aside whoever it was that gave Maria-chan the letter. Ooh, Beatrice exists. Ooh. Even though she was puffing up her cheeks in that cute way she'd been doing since yesterday, I couldn't think of it as cute. If I poke fun at her, it might suddenly transform into a creepy laugh. There is no hidden gold. However, if the culprit is blindly sure of its existence, and if they're trying to make us solve the riddle before snatching gold away from themselves, then I will agree it makes sense. Of course, she's seen that gold bar, so she's blatantly lying to them, by the way. However, if that were the case, why would they start by killing those most highly ranked in the Ushibita family? I see your point. If they wanted to make us solve the riddle, killing those closest to Kinzo-san doesn't sound like a good plan to me. That's true enough. And if we're going with that argument, wouldn't it have been quicker to threaten Father in the first place? You'd think it'd be faster to just ask the person who wrote it, rather than try to force us to solve it. You've got a point there. Still, I think it'd take more than your average threat to make Father spill the beans. Anyone who knows Kinzo-san well would probably realize that he won't bow to ordinary threats. He's the man who bears responsibility for the Ushibita family and all its vast wealth. He's been exposed to many threats and attacks in the past. The family only prospers today because he was able to overcome all of them. That's freaking right. I can't even imagine our grandfather obeying someone because of a threat. Jessica, watch your language. Yes, Mom. In that case, what about this idea? No, wait, is this one also way out there? I couldn't hesitate. Out there ideas are like bows and arrows. It might be hard to hit with, but it's a great weapon, because you can hit enemies far away. They say most people who died in battles were killed by arrow wounds. In a battle, you can't just shoot off one arrow. You shoot a whole bunch of arrows at once, pushing towards the enemy troops with a wall of them. So keep shooting over and over. Create a wall as you push forwards toward the truth. If the culprit's after the hidden gold forcing us to solve the riddle wouldn't be very efficient for them. It'd be much quicker and easier to ask the person who made it in the first place. In that case, the question is this all a message directed at Grandfather? In other words, these murders were a threat made against Grandfather. If he didn't tell the culprit where the gold was, his family members would be killed off one by one. What if we weren't the only ones being forced to solve this riddle? What if grandfather was too? If you think about it that way, it explains grandfather's mysterious disappearance. If the culprit has already attacked grandfather, then judging by the state the six corpses were left in, he should have been left on display somewhere with that horrible makeup added. But despite that, we haven't found him. So does that mean grandfather's been kidnapped and is being held somewhere? How could... You weren't saying, how could... That sounds interesting. So grandfather's being confined somewhere, and the culprit's saying will be killed off one by one if he doesn't tell them where the gold is? It pains me to imagine how you find that interesting. Aunt Natsu glared at her, but Aunt Ava just smiled calmly. Since we still haven't seen it after all this time, I think it's almost certain that grandfather's gotten caught up in the crime. If you think about it, you can't just ignore Balor-kun's theory, right? Be quiet, George. In the first place, when did father actually disappear? Who was the last person to see father? It was probably me. This morning, when we didn't know where my husband and the rest were, we discussed the possibility of them being in father's study, and I went to check his room and greeted him there. Come to think of it, I've been holding the key to his study this whole time, haven't I? Genji, let me return this to you. Aunt Natsu pulled out the gold key and handed it to Genji. Looking at the key, Aunt Ava giggled. Hey, Genji-san, I'm sure the police will inspect father's room thoroughly. If there's anything hidden there, it'll just be exposed anyway. So maybe it'd be better if you just told us about it right here, right now. What are you talking about? It's simple. Father's study is a closed room, with no way in or out except that key, right? I want to verify whether that's true. There's one entrance to father's study. What about the window? Any other entrances or exits? There are none. There is no way to get in except the entrance. You're sure about that? There isn't some secret hidden door or anything? Since father isn't here, I'm the highest ranked member of the Ushimura family. I'm asking you as a representative of the Ushimura family head. Remember that when you answer me. Are there any ways in or out of that room other than the main entrance? As father's closest aide, I'm sure you would know. Natsu looked a little offended at the part about the highest ranked family member, but she kept her mouth closed for the time being and waited for Genji's answer. I couldn't help but feel a little uncomfortable. Why was she going on and on about hidden doors? You too, Kan-kun, Kurosawa-san. If you know, why won't you tell me? If you know, won't you tell me? If there is one, it'd be better if you said so. Otherwise, a certain person might be driven into a corner in a second. If we assume that there's a hidden door, then my argument comes to nothing. Aunt Ava didn't specify which person was about to be driven into a corner. Following the flow of the conversation, I had to feel that she was referring to Aunt Natsuki. Mother, what are you talking about? George, stay quiet for a bit. What do you say? Genji-san? Kanen-kun? Or Kurosawa-san? Is there a hidden door, or not? Genji-san, when you remodeled father's study, you must have overseen the construction. I want you to say you don't know. Ava's checking the server logs here. There is nothing like that in the master study. You're sure? What about Kanen-kun, one who's allowed to wear the one-winged eagle? That's right, I'm sure. There's no such hidden door in the master study. Musawa-san? No, I haven't heard of such a thing. What about Dr. Najo? You've had a close relationship with father. I've never heard of something like that. Very well then. So are you ready? Let me begin. It's very simple. Everyone tilted their head doubtfully, wondering what Aunt Ava was starting to talk about so proudly. She set a trap. Aunt Ava laughed triumphantly, as though she were about to reveal a secret only she knew. Natsu-ne-san was the last person to spot father, right? I forget the exact time, but I think it was a little before 9 in the morning. Ne-san, do you remember? I ran into you just as you were coming out of father's study, right? Yes, I remember. What does that have to do with anything? And when was the next time you went to visit father's study? That was after we found the bodies of Nisan and the rest, right? Together with me, you went up to the study to report that, and we discovered that he wasn't there. By the way, Ne-san, at that time, when you went to their father's study, did you notice anything? Notice anything? What are you talking about? Come on. You picked up some trash, right? A folded receipt. I do seem to remember picking up some trash. How is that relevant? I got that receipt when I bought some candy at a store before arriving at the airport. Aunt Ava pulled out a small bag of candy out of her handbag. Ah, the receipt from that candy you bought back there? But mother, what does that receipt have to do with anything? George, stay quiet and listen for just a bit longer. Uncle Hideyoshi's expression was a little strict. Apparently, he understood what Aunt Ava was getting at. It really was just a whim. I definitely didn't foresee anything. Or try to set up a trap for Natsu-ne-san or anything like that. Actually, about that receipt. Ne-san, you remember bumping into me right after the last time I saw father, right? At that time, I wedged this into the door. into the door to the study. So, what does that mean? Are you saying no one opened the door until Aunt Nazi picked up that receipt? But wait a second, Aunt Ava. Putting a receipt in would be obvious. It's possible that when Grandfather opened the door, he noticed it, found it amusing, and stuck it back in the door. That does sound like him. Jessica hurriedly argued back. She still didn't really know what this all meant, but she realized that, whatever it was, it would raise suspicions about her own mother. Of course, I folded the receipt up very small so that no one would notice it. But even if you assumed that he saw it fall, he would have no way of knowing how high up the door it had been stuck, right? I checked it while Natsuine-san was taking the key out. The receipt was still stuck, not 1 millimeter away from where I put it. I can't understand why he would pull such a childish prank. I'll bet you were the one who did that prank on the door to my room, too. The door to your room? It was unpleasant to talk about, so I never mentioned it. But when I woke up this morning, there were the signs of some prank on the outside of my door, with what was probably the same red paint that was scribbled across the shutter. There were some unpleasant marks, as though someone had been tearing at the door. Wait, what's this? Why'd you keep quiet about this till now? My apologies. Since so many horrible things have occurred since then, I'd completely forgotten about it until this moment. I don't know anything about that. I'm not talking about your door, but the door to Father's room, right? Between the time you confirmed that he was in his room and the time we confirmed that he wasn't, that door wasn't open even once. How did Father get out if he didn't use the door? I don't know. That's what I want to know. Natsuine-san, other than you, who else checked to see whether Father was in his room? Last night, the last time I met Kinzo-san was when we were playing chess. So I was with him until just before dinner. Who saw him after that? I did. I gave him his dinner last night. Yes, Sean and I were with him. So at that time, Father was definitely still in his room. Or Natsuine-san, when he found out he wasn't there, it looks like all ways in or out of the study were closed, right? But even so, you said you met with him this morning. I don't understand why everyone has become so gloomy. Could someone please explain it to me? But Father and Mother, are you saying that what Natsui says about meeting Grandfather this morning was a lie? Like hell she'd lie about that. Mom's guiltless. Why would she lie? I mean, we saw her meet with Kinzo. So, we know there's something weird going on here. Jessica, I keep telling you to watch your language. All at once, the whole room was in an uproar. Aunt Ava and Aunt Natsui confronted each other across the parlor table, with George confronting Jessica. What the heck's going on? Many people spotted him last night, right? But since this morning, the only one who claims to have seen Father is Natsuine-san. What kind of possibility could this mean? Could this mean there really is some kind of hidden door? Could this mean that someone saw Ava put the receipt there and somehow put it back or something? Basically, nothing really sounds feasible or like plausible, right? So, try to just bear this all in mind. I'm gonna say that a lot. Bear this in mind. And then there's that strange fact we learned from my receipt. So how can we connect these points together? Basically, what Ava's saying sounds like it makes sense, but we know it's not true. So that's really weird, right? Aunt Ava urged everyone to imagine it. And maybe Kinzo's hiding under his bed. Yeah, maybe. We don't know how thoroughly they checked. That's very possible, right? Basically, if we don't see it said in red, we don't know. And that's why moving forward in episode 2, we're going to start seeing these facts laid out in red. For example, we could see a red phrase that says like, there's nowhere to hide in Kinzo's room. So if he's in there, he'll be seen, or something like that. Basically, we'll be getting information that helps narrow down possibilities and remove ambiguity from situations. Right now, let your imaginations run wild and just think of all these contradictions and things here and how maybe they could make sense. Try to imagine a way that this story is making sense. Aunt Ava urged everyone to imagine it. Sure, that receipt could become an important point, but I didn't know which other points to tie it to or how. If we try searching for the answer Aunt Ava probably wants, we'll find that Aunt Nazi lied and acted as though Grandfather was in the room this morning. Has that fact been exposed by a whim of Aunt Ava's? I don't get it at all. Why would Mom have to lie? She had no reason to, right? That's what I want to know. But Jessica-chan, you can't be sure she had no reason to lie and say that Grandfather was in the room. After all, you can see it in mystery novels now and you see it in mystery novels every now and then. That trick where people fake the time of death to create an alibi for themselves. But what are you talking about? I've never heard of that. We still haven't found Father yet. It's pretty natural to assume he's already been killed. If that's true, there's no doubt we'll find his corpse soon. If, at that point, the time of death could be cleverly faked, Natsune-san would be able to create an alibi. Do you understand? Everyone? He doesn't have the strength to move Kinzo. Well. Huh. Maybe she has an accomplice or something. If something happened there. This morning, when Aunt Natsu confirmed that grandfather was there, she lied. He was already dead at that time, and then she moved the body to some other location and tampered with it so that when we find it, we'll think he was just killed a second ago. That'd make it possible for her to create an alibi, even just by staying with the rest of us. Then she could say, I heard someone screaming, dash over there, and become the first to find the body along with everyone else. Is that what Aunt A was saying? Ridiculous. After all, detective novels are merely books for the purpose of entertainment. You only think of such an indiscreet idea because you read them all the time. That's right. Even if she did try to fake the time of death a little, all that would be blown away in an instant once the police did their autopsy. That might have worked in the past, but do you really think that kind of trick would work in modern Japan? It doesn't make sense. You think so? This morning when Dr. Nanja looked at the corpses, he was only able to give a vague estimate of the time of death, right? Autopsy results are very easily affected by the environment and individual differences. It's a very relative estimate with an uncertainty of several hours. And, unfortunately, the police's scientific investigation will have to wait until tomorrow. It wouldn't be easy to measure the correct time of death so accurately, even in modern Japan. Isn't that right, Dr. Nanja? Examining a corpse is an extremely difficult task. It requires both experience and instinct. I've heard that there's a very high chance of a mistaken diagnosis. I imagine it's very possible for a misreading of just a few hours to occur. However, for an alibi, that's more than enough. It's an old trick. It's a trick that works well enough. Natsune-san, it's not like we want to suspect you, okay? We just want you to prove your innocence so we don't have to suspect you. What is this innocence you want me to prove? This morning, I definitely met with Father. He told me to keep the one-winged eagle engraved in my heart. Are you denying that he said that too? I will certainly not permit that. I don't want you to deny that Father said those words. Or maybe Father's body won't appear anywhere. Normally, a person has to be missing for 7 years before they're officially dead. Wouldn't that be a clever way to extend Father's nearly finished life for another 7 years and keep all of his wealth for yourself? I can't let you get away with saying that. I can't let you get away with saying anymore. I am Ushidami Natsuki, although I do not have the weight to wear the one-winged eagle on my body. It is certainly engraved on my heart. What do you think you're saying to the wife of Kraus, successor to the head, and one who will act as such in his place? What's this? You're going to shoot me with that gun? Go ahead. If only you just shoot. You're just desperate because you can't think of a way out, right? Do it. Just try to obscure the truth of the violence. It's spicy here. It wasn't like Aunt Natsu had actually been holding that gun at the ready and threatening anyone. But as she was egged on by Aunt Eva, she did hold it at the ready. Unsurprisingly, once things got to the stage, Jessica and Genji-san tried to stop her. Madam, please, calm yourself. Mom, you aren't lying, so there's no reason for you to listen to this. Calm down, Natsu-san. All you've got to do is swear that Father definitely was in that room. Why are you getting so worked up? That is correct. Natsu-san isn't lying. Shouldn't that be the end of it? Then I want you to explain. How did Father manage to disappear from the room? The window was closed tight from the inside. The same was true with the door, right? This morning, if you really met with Father, then you must explain how Father disappeared from this unopenable door, closed room scenario. If you don't, that'd mean you're lying after all, right? How far do you plan to mock me? If you want to argue back, go ahead. That's right, try explaining it right here, right now. If you do, I'll apologize for suspecting you. How did Father manage to get out from that closed room? I cannot explain, and there's no need for me to do so. Really, then let me explain it. Let's take the best parts from my perspective and yours, and come up with a more friendly explanation. I'll believe what you said about Father still being in his room this morning. However, the next time the door was opened, Father wasn't there. You don't have any objections so far, right? I have no desire to hear anything more you have to say. Shut your frivolous mouth. Oh, here we go. We're getting the diagrams. It gets good when we have diagrams. My reasoning goes like this, okay? I can confirm that on both occasions, you were the only one to go through that door. And the receipt proves it. So what's the answer to the puzzle of how Father left the room? The window. He was sent out the window. Natsune-san, you threw Father out of the third-story window of the study into the courtyard. You... Madam, please endure it. Eva-sama, please stop this. After that, when you left and said you were going to check the doors and windows, you took Father's corpse, which had fallen in the courtyard, and hid it. That was probably when you took some measures to fake the time of death, right? This ties in with the case regarding Krasnisa and the rest, and also the case regarding Beatrice last night. There's a really good chance we've got reason to suspect Natsuki-san in all those cases. Normally, I wouldn't want to say this, but now that it's out in the open, there's nothing else I can do. Please, Natsuki-san, please explain how you can be innocent. Otherwise, I can't help but suspect you. Why me? Why must I, Ushibita Natsuki, be insulted like this? Looks like we've got everyone's views on record now. Hehehe. It's useless. It's all useless. Dameda, zen dameda. He said his catchphrase. It's all useless, Anteva. What do you mean, useless? Jessica looked up at me, hanging on to my every word. Anteva's expression was confident as ever. Useless, you say? What is? Battler-kun, tell me. You're only convinced it wasn't Natsuki because you're only looking at the case from a single angle. It's not like I'm defending her, but that bluff of a checkmate isn't going to fly. I think your reasoning regarding that receipt was passable. It's not a bad thread of logic, but I'd only give it a grade of 65 at best. If this were an exam, that'd be bad enough to get you extra lessons in detention, right? Hehe. Oh my. Well, how do you think anyone could break through the door sealed by my receipt and make Father disappear? Other than by my theory. It's true that your theory is an interesting one. And if you could say for sure that there was no way to make Grandfather disappear, then you probably would be able to prove that the last person to see him, Natsuki, was guilty. However, since there is still a possibility she's innocent and these accusations are false, we can't be sure about that. Then Battler-kun, are you saying someone other than Natsuki-san made Grandfather disappear? It'd be impossible for anyone else to do it. My receipt proved that, right? After the first time she visited that study, and until the second time when we visited it together, the study was a perfect closed room, and when the seal was broken in the closed room, he was already missing. If that doesn't prove she's the culprit, what kind of trick could they have used? Like I said, Anteva, only 65 points. So let's try spinning this chessboard around, shall we? The question isn't how someone managed to make Grandfather disappear from the outside. We should think about how Grandfather disappeared from the inside. The door had the receipt stuck in it, so it couldn't have been used. He also couldn't have gone through the window, because you can't lock it from the outside. And when Aunt Ava visited the study, she checked to make sure it was locked. So the window also wasn't used. At that point, the study really was a closed room. We have to accept this. However, the study didn't remain a closed room forever. Once the seal created by the receipt was removed, it'd be possible for someone to escape by the door. In other words, the question isn't how Natsuki made Grandfather disappear. We need to think about how he was able to escape. Grandfather's study isn't an ordinary study, right? According to Genji-san, there's a toilet, and a kitchen, and even a bedroom, almost like a little house. For example, what if he was hiding under the bed, and the two of you only thought he was missing? And you only thought he was missing. I'll tell you what, even you didn't check that far, right? And then the two of you went back down the stairs thinking he wasn't there. At that time, the receipt was already gone. In other words, if Grandfather was hiding in his room the whole time it was a closed room, and escaped after letting the two of you go past him, we can crack the closed room right open. But what are you talking about? Why would Father need to escape the room in such a bizarre fashion? Don't be so absurd. Yeah, it might be absurd. However, it still shows that there's a possibility Natsuki is being falsely accused. The receipt wasn't perfect. In chess, we might call that check, but it isn't checkmate. The thing that really pisses me off is how you're pressuring Aunt Natsuki to explain it, and claiming that she must be guilty if she doesn't. If you want to go down that road, then why don't you let me, Ushibino Battler, spin the chessboard around one more time? Anteva, according to your own argument, you must explain to us why you and Uncle Hideyoshi couldn't have killed those 6 last night and then casually returned to the guest house. You've been trying to force Aunt Natsuki to explain, so I'm sure you can prove your own innocence, right? Especially now that all Grandfather's wealth has suddenly plopped right down into your hands. That's right, you're suspicious enough yourself, aren't you? If you say Mom's suspicious because she was the last person to see him, then what about you, Aunt Ava? The last person to see Dad of the rest. Just like Battler said, prove that you two weren't the ones who killed them. Mother, I also think your reasoning was a little overeager. I'm sure the receipt was an important hint. But like Battler said, that's not enough to prove that Aunt Natsuki was responsible for some plot. We're all equally suspicious. It's not right for only Aunt Natsuki to be persecuted. Our proud father crawling out of his bed. You call nonsense like that an explanation? In that case, why don't you explain first? Who killed those 6 and how? And that try showing us proof that you weren't involved. Cough, cough, cough. You cough, cough, cough. Oh, cough, cough. Yeah, I think this came up once before. She has like bad asthma. It blows up when she gets overexcited. My lady. Jessica suddenly started coughing. At first I thought she was just joking after yelling too loud, but after long I realized how painful it looked. Jessica kept coughing and choking, down on her hands and knees. Jessica, hang in there. Talk to Nanjo. Jessica-san, your inhaler, quickly. Oh wait, I have one with me. Dr. Najo pulled a bronchodilator inhaler from his own bag, which was lying on the sofa, and handed it to Jessica. Think of it, 6 years ago, didn't Jessica sometimes break into violent coughing fits and have to use that? However, 6 years ago, I never saw Jessica look like she was in this much pain. Nacho Castilla. I actually had asthma as a kid, but it just kind of went away eventually. I had an inhaler for a short time. I didn't use it much. But, I would essentially find it really difficult to breathe, if I started crying. Pretty scary stuff. Aniki, was Jessica's asthma always this bad? It's gotten a lot worse these last few years. It's no problem when she's normal, but when an attack comes suddenly, she can't stop coughing anymore. Ooh, cough, cough, cough. My lady, your medicine. Here. Taking the inhaler from Kanran-kun, Jessica used it with a practiced hand. Looked like her throat would still itch for a while, but she had it under control. Are you okay, Jessica? You scared me. It's no big deal. Don't worry about it. Beads of sweat covered Jessica's whole body, and she couldn't hide her rough breathing, but it looked like her sudden attack had calmed down for now. This disturbance had made the dangerous atmosphere up until now seem slightly unfocused. Ruined the moment. But that's fine. That kind of battle of mutual suspicion is completely unnecessary. If you think about it, finding alibis for each other and looking for the culprit is probably meaningless. After all, we're just powerless ordinary people. And when the police come tomorrow, they'll definitely employ cutting-edge techniques and investigate the case thoroughly, solving all the riddles and arresting the culprit. Perhaps Battler-kun is right after all. Just as Natsuine-san is suspicious, I can't ignore the fact that I'm suspicious too. Arguing about that now will surely be unproductive. Everything will be fine if we just leave it to police tomorrow. But don't you want to know too, Battler-kun? Who the culprit is? Don't you want to let them know the pain you feel from losing someone precious to you as soon as possible? I won't deny that. Even one day would be too long to let the wonderful bastard who's behind this go. But that doesn't mean that I want to suspect one of the 18. Even though what I said earlier, I don't even want to suspect you, Aunt Ava. To me, you're an awesome aunt who is always fun and playful. I don't want to trade insults with an aunt like that. I wouldn't want to do that with anyone here. Right? Everyone? I feel the same way as Battler-kun. It's pointless to trade insults. It's probably just the stress built up because so many people have been crammed in one place since morning. Probably. It is only natural. It may not be my place to say it, but I think we should all relax as much as possible. If I were to touch him right now, he gets up. He never lays down if you pet him. I got his attention, so it didn't really surprise him much. Ava, I think we'd better cool our heads too. The receipt's definitely a big clue for figuring out how Father disappeared. You should tell the police about it when they come. That's right. Right. I just felt a little triumphant when I figured out that part with the receipt. Of course, it isn't fair to only suspect Natsuine-san, right? More just as suspicious. But still, Battler-kun, at least the part about the receipt is real, okay? Don't forget it. And try thinking deeply about what it means one more time, okay? Aunt Ava and Uncle Hideyoshi stood up. It looked like they planned on leaving the parlor. In the end, it's pointless for us to keep playing detectives. After all, the police will reveal everything anyway. That's right. Even if we don't play this detective game, the typhoon will pass, and when those lively seagulls return to the harbor, when the seagulls cry, everything will settle itself. That's right. If you think about it, this kind of crime is completely trivial. It will definitely be resolved, even if we do nothing. Umineko no Naku Koro ni. He did it, it's only episode 1 and he already did it. Natsuine-san, I take it you don't want to see my face anymore? I feel the same. If I remember correctly, yesterday, you had some rooms prepared for us in the mansion, so that we wouldn't need to go back to the guest house, right? Those should each have a bath and a toilet, as well as a lock and chain to secure the door. There's even a bed to lie in, and my husband will be able to watch TV without having to fight with Mario-chan over which channel to watch, right? Do whatever you want, but make sure to be cautious. Thank you, Nae-san, and mind your own business. I'll be counting on you to keep an eye on everyone, okay? Because the culprit is definitely here. And Nae-san, make sure you don't forget to keep an eye on yourself, too. Have you finished taking your parting shots? Yes, I'm finished. See you, Natsuine-san. Genji-san, let us know when it's time for dinner. Until then, we'll lock ourselves in with a chain. Genji, Kanan, escort them to the guest room. We'll be fine. I hate shitty escorts. In fact, I'd be more comfortable if nobody leaves this room until we reach ours. Let's go, George. I'll stay here with everyone. George, the culprit is in this room. Do you plan on staying at a place like that? Leaving this room would be the same as suspecting one of my relatives. I can't believe anyone in our family is capable of something that horrible. George, darling, you tell him too. George is already an adult man. If his code tells him not to leave this room, then it's up to him. Let him do what he wants. Father. Aunt Ava and Uncle Hideyoshi left. The only voice that called after them was the sound of the rain. The parlor was being buried beneath the savage atmosphere. When I looked at the clock, I was surprised to find out that it was already evening. Had we really spent that much time worrying about needless things, talking with each other, fighting with each other? Feeling bored, I started scratching at my head when Maria and I made eye contact. I was a little surprised since I thought she was completely immersed in the TV. I believe it now. Oh? The letter, the murders, everything. It was all Beatrice. In fact, I almost feel like begging her to come out and take credit for it all. I want it to be the work of a 19th person. Otherwise, the 18 of us will have to keep on suspecting each other. I think believing in a 19th person is better than that. Bringing your grandfather outside without opening the doors or windows must be a piece of cake for Beatrice, right? Maria, after taking a single short breath, hung her head and then raised her face again. That's right. Hee hee hee, locking a door is useless against a witch. Beatrice is familiar with all 72 demons. The 33rd ranked, Gap, gives the power to instantly carry the desired person to any location. It's Yukari. Gap. Gap. To her, taking a person out of an enclosed room isn't hard at all, you see. Hehehehe. Which is sure incredible. Tell her if she feels like committing another crime, to do it in a way that no human could. And make me believe that a 19th person... No, a witch exists. Hehehe. Okay. If I meet her, I'll tell her. That sure would be nice, wouldn't it? Crap. Nothing's made sense to me for a while now. Just when I want to believe in a 19th person, I deny it. And just when I want to believe there are only 18 people, I deny that too. Even though I want there to be more than just the 18 people here, I can't accept the existence of that 19th person. In short, even though there are more than 18 people, there are less than 19 people. The number of people in this mansion is 19 greater than X greater than 18. So the number of people can't be represented by an integer. However, it's impossible for there to be anything after the decimal point. You shouldn't be able to show the number of people with anything but an integer. And yet, 19 is greater than X is greater than 18. How do you explain the fraction less than 1? It's no wonder. That 19th person was something that couldn't be seen. That's why, since you can only write the number of people as an integer, you couldn't see that person. That witch cannot be seen, because Beatrice has no body. Therefore, she's invisible. Is there a 19th person, or not? Does the witch exist, or not? 19 is greater than X is greater than 18. Which exists somewhere in that X. Fascinating. So we're going from 4 p.m. to 7. Pretty big time skip. Only so much time left in the day. I don't think there's anything in particular new, right? Yep, hasn't updated anything. I think I might keep on going until the next... Well, next murder. It's probably no surprise that there's going to be another murder. Technically, I shouldn't spoil things, but the game's not going to end with just 6 people dying. I'm going to keep on going until the next murder. The uncomfortable atmosphere continued even after those 2 left. It was thick with the idea that simply thinking about the culprit's identity would be the same as deciding whom to suspect. It had begun to feel like discussion of the case was itself taboo, so no one mentioned the case, at least out loud. However, those thoughts were what filled our minds. All that we couldn't say aloud made our heads feel like they were going to explode. So at least on the outside, the parlor had once again regained its calm mood. Everything was left unsettled. It feels like the rain's gotten a little lighter. Yeah, Beatrice comes to break your kneecaps if you don't pay on time. She breaks your whole family's kneecaps. Ooh. Still pouring down. Ooh. Even if it did stop, there's no boat on this island. But it'd be nice if the boat came quickly tomorrow. I've had enough of this Western Mansion vacation. Hehe. Mom, when will the boat come tomorrow? Normally, the boat to take them back would arrive at 3 today. They probably sent us a phone call to say that they'd come after the typhoon passed, but unfortunately the phones aren't working. But they aren't children over there. They were told to both drop off and collect their guests, so they will most likely arrive first thing tomorrow morning, probably about 9, I believe. It was completely black outside. When I looked at the clock, I realized that it was just past 7, so we got like 14 hours left until we can get off the island. I was starting to get hungry. In the kitchen, Kumasawa was cooking enthusiastically. She had laid out a variety of dishes, and while they didn't match the level of Goda's artful cooking, they were still quite gorgeous. It was an act of kindness from Kumasawa, who was trying to enliven everyone's low spirits with some food. Kumasawa wasn't nearly as talented as a professional cook like Goda, but she was far from unskilled. On the contrary, since she'd been brought up in a fishing village, the simple food she created was sometimes highly praised. Kanan arranged the food Kumasawa had finished creating on plates under her direction. Kanan also helped in the kitchen sometimes, but since he was rarely placed in that role, he was slightly awkward even though he tried his best. Self-conscious about the fact that he couldn't cleverly arrange the food, Kanan's expression darkened slightly. But Kumasawa smiled as though everything was fine. Oh, it's arranged beautifully. Kanan could. Aren't you skilled? Nihongo jouzu desu ne. If it had been Shanane-san, it would look even more beautiful. Kanan stopped arranging the food for a bit and hung his head. Shannon was the one who always assisted Kumasawa in her cooking. Tonight, Kanan was doing it instead. And as he remembered Shannon's face and her brutal end, he grimaced. Forget that for now. Genji spoke kindly to Kanan as he advanced upon. Nan tried to escape from the parlor once the mood had grown sour, and Genji had become his opponent in game of chess upon Nanjo's request. Yes, I will forget it for now. Indeed, that is probably for the best. Genji purposely refrained from facing Kanan as he spoke. He did so because he understood that it might make things tougher on Kanan if he noticed that someone was looking at his eyes. Nanjo also understood that and held back any thoughtless words. I wonder where Kinzo-san has gone. I hope that he's safe, but I do not know. However, I believe everything has proceeded as the master has hoped and arranged for. To distrust that would exceed my role as furniture in service to the master. Aren't you scared, Genji-san? I'm frightened that something bad will occur again tonight. I have nothing to be afraid of. I serve the Ushimura family, and that is all. Nanjo sighed through his nose and made a carefully considered move. Nanjo was very slightly dubious. I mean, don't forget that Kinzo had this whole scene where he threw the ring out the window and told Beatrice to come and get her interest. Sorry. Could Genji possibly be thinking that he'd be left out of this? He couldn't even imagine what was happening inside this mansion. But he definitely couldn't deny the possibility that Kinzo had devised something. If you liken this on to chess, Kinzo had opened the game, and as a result, 6 pieces had been defeated. Could it be that Genji was calm because he believed he alone was on the outside of the chessboard, and therefore safe? I don't think Genji cares. Nanjo thought about it. Isn't everyone just a piece on this chessboard, lined up equally, without any exceptions? Wasn't even Genji, who had gained more of Kinzo's trust than anyone. No, who was confident of his position as Kinzo's only close friend. Just another one of the pieces laid out on the chessboard. Genji-san, I'm truly frightened about tonight. I hope with all my heart that we will still be safe when tomorrow morning comes. What do you think the odds are? The guest room Eva and Hideyoshi moved into had originally been built to house guests before the guest house's construction. So until a few years ago, they had stayed in these rooms every family conference and were very familiar with them. This room was just like a room at a hotel, with a bedroom and a bathroom. So even though they were still shut in, it was far more comfortable than the parlor. Guess it's true you can relax more when you're alone with your family. It would be better for if everyone else also shut themselves in guest rooms and locked the doors. Natsune-san said that no one could leave the parlor, throwing her weight around. I'm sure no one will be able to talk back. She's always been treated so coldly, so now that Nisan's dead, she's been excited about finally having so much power. Seriously, how shameless can she be? Come now, don't say that. Natsu-san's doing pretty well. No need to jump on her like that. About that receipt earlier, you went too far. Come on, if I hadn't said it there wouldn't be another good time to say it. Ava, sulking cutely looking at the television, sat alongside Hideyoshi, who was lying on the bed. Like I said, Ava's pretty cool. So we haven't been alone like this for quite some time. You're right. Come to think of it, both you and I have gotten pretty old. Since George was born, everything's gone by in the blink of an eye. It really has. I wonder if we were too hasty in having a child. Ava's eyes looked like they were staring off into the distance. Yes, she thought of it as a once-in-a-lifetime chance. Her older brother Kraus had been able to father a child for quite some time. 6 years passed after his marriage to Natsuki without any signs of pregnancy, which didn't please Kinzo at all. Eva herself had thought that, since her name would be moved outside the Ushimura register when she got married anyway, it didn't matter whether a successor to the headship was born or not. And then, one day, she had a heavenly revelation, or maybe it was the whisperings of the devil that she had listened to and agreed. If she could give birth to a successor first, wouldn't she be able to remain in the Ushimura register? If things went well, might she have a chance to inherit the Ushimura family herself? When she proposed this to Hideyoshi, he had approved of it instantly. This wasn't because Hideyoshi also had greedy thoughts. For Hideyoshi, who had no close relatives, it was a chance for him to feel once more the long-forgotten thing called family. So when they got married, he hadn't fussed over which last name they were to keep, and had quickly agreed to have his name entered into the Ushimura family register. It hadn't been easy to persuade Kinzo, but as his daughter, Eva knew Kinzo's personality well. So, by choosing the time when Kinzo was most dissatisfied with Natsuki, she was magnificently able to make him accept Hideyoshi as an adopted son-in-law. Looking at Hideyoshi, who had achieved success after starting from nothing, Kinzo might have seen a little bit of himself. He quickly grew to like Hideyoshi and approved his transfer into the Ushimura register. George would eventually become the successor to the Ushimura family. They had raised him strictly with that purpose in mind. He had been worth their while and had grown into a fabulous young man, who wouldn't disappoint no matter where he went. That was why he had not been permitted to fall in love with a servant like Shannon. So when she learned that Shannon was dead and the engagement was now invalid, though part of her had still been shocked by the gruesome crime, part of her had also been relieved that her dear George wouldn't be stolen by some servant girl. I've hated Kraus Nissan since long ago. He was so full of himself, always swaggering around, so proud that he would one day become the head. So I wanted to get back at him. Was that just a childish emotion? But in the end, that emotion guided my entire life. If that had been all, then it would have been fine. But because of that emotion, I got you and George involved. I used you. Eva, don't blame yourself for that. Hideyoshi got up and held Eva's shoulder. She could feel a warm understanding from him. Well, I reached the halfway point of my life long ago. But you know, I have absolutely no regrets about how I've lived my life. Not one. I think that since I've been with you, Eva, I've been able to relish and enjoy the life that other men never will. After I lost my relatives in the war, you reminded me what the warmth of a family is. So I'm grateful to the Ushimura family and think of it as my only one. In this life I've led with you, not a single thing's been wasted. It's really been a fun life up till today. That's heartwarming. Thank you, darling. Eva hung her head, burying her face in Hideyoshi's chest. Probably no one else in the parlor could even imagine that this side of Eva existed. I'm the only one who should be thanking you. I'm the one who should be thanking you. I keep making words. Until today, there hasn't been a single day I've regretted being with you. Me too. I'm so glad to have you by my side. George is already a fine adult. Even if I don't look out for him, he's a man who could do his job well on his own. I wonder, around New Year's, do you want to go spend some time in the Maldives? Maldives? Just us, no one else. No way. Aren't you always saying that you're busy responding to New Year's cards that you don't even sleep? None of that this New Year's. I don't read New Year's cards. I'll just stay quiet and check to see if I've won the New Year's lottery. It should be nice if we won a color TV this year. No way. I don't want to waste time checking the lottery on the Maldives. Then none of that either. How does it sound? Just the two of us taking it easy like when we were newlyweds, just before George was born. Yes. In that case, fine. I hear the Maldives are wonderful. An island with nothing on it, surrounded by beautiful coral reefs and cottages lined up over the water. Like when we were newlyweds, you say? Starting when? As soon as I finished up some business. No one know until I asked the travel agency, but probably before New Year's Eve. No way. Right now. I want to go right now. Eva nagged his lips in a peevish yet flirtatious manner. The only sounds that filled the room were the distant voice of the announcer on the news, which Hideyoshi had left on, and the obnoxious pounding of the rain against the window. Don't worry, we're not going to get, like, middle-aged person sex scene or anything like that. Umineko doesn't have any of that, thankfully. There was a knock on the door, and Genji-san entered. Madam, dinner has been prepared. Will you eat in here again? Yes. Have it brought here. Is Dr. Nanjo still in the kitchen? Yes. He has said he wishes to carefully deliberate over his next move. Do not worry, he is with the other servants. Genji-san's good enough at chess to be grandfather's opponent. I hear he's even better than Dr. Nanjo, right? That's right. Long ago he played against me, but he must have let me win. Maria, sounds like it'll be time to eat soon. But look at you, you've been watching TV all day long and you still haven't gotten bored. Ooh, I'm always watching TV, so I'm fine. Ooh. Heh, Mario-chan sure is a TV kid. Food's coming, so we have to clean up the table. What's your deal? Go on. Rat. Earlier, we had torn several pages out of Mario's notebook, and there was now a mess where everyone had been drawing together. Jessica began cleaning that up quickly. Still, everyone here really can draw. I'd never guessed. Genji, ask Eva-san and Hideyoshi-san whether they'd at least like to have dinner with us. Although they will probably turn us down. I mean, they did say to say when dinner's ready. They wanted a heads up. Certainly. First father and now Eva-san. It's quite hard to gather everyone to the Yoshimida dinner table. Nancy felt her headache start throbbing again and lightly held her temples. Got hair in my glass here. The distance from the kitchen to the parlor wasn't that great, so Genji had gone and come back by himself, but the guest room was a little farther away. Nancy had warned him to avoid being alone whenever possible, and just now, Nanjo had also admonished him, saying it would be better if he held a little more concern for his safety. Canon accompanied Genji, and the two of them went to visit Eva and Hideyoshi in their guest room. Genji knocked on the door. Eva-sama, Hideyoshi-sama, dinner has been prepared. He waited a short while for them to come out, but there was no response. Genji-sama, look at this. Canon pointed under the door. A Western envelope had been inserted under it. Normally, when something was inserted this way, it'd be interpreted as a message from someone outside to someone in the room. So, since this might be a private note meant for Eva and Hideyoshi, it was not something that Canon and Genji were supposed to take interest in. This Western envelope was one of Kinzo's, the same kind as the one Maria had taken out last night, and surprised everyone with. There can be no mistake. It is one of the Master's envelopes. Or could it be? Even though this was one of Kinzo's envelopes, the letter Maria read aloud the previous night hadn't come from Kinzo. Genji continued knocking a little harder and called out in a loud voice. Eva-sama, Eva-sama, it is Genji. Are you there? Please answer, Eva-sama. Well, there was no response from inside. Sometimes, when the servants went to call some guests for a meal, the guests would be sleeping so deeply that they wouldn't wake up. At times like that, the servants would stick a letter in the door to show that it was time to come out and leave the guest be. But despite that, Genji beat even harder on the door and called out Eva's name. However, there was no answer. Kana stuck his ear up to the door, held his breath, and listened for any sounds coming from inside. There's something that sounds like the television. I don't sense anyone. The room might be empty. Genji took out a handkerchief, and careful not to touch it with his bare hands, gently pulled out the envelope that had been stuck into the door. It was sealed with deep red sealing wax. Without a doubt, a mark on that sealing wax had come from the Ushibita family head's ring. Eva-sama, Eva-sama, please answer. Are you still in your room? There was still no answer. There was a chance that those two were aimlessly walking around the mansion. This was the home Eva had grown up in. There was plenty of reason to think that she'd gone out on a casual stroll. Genji groped down in his pocket and pulled out the bundle of keys, which contained the key that would open the guest room. Genji-sama? Kanan also understood what this meant. They would sometimes unlock the door so they could go in and do things like make the beds, but only after they made sure the guests were out. To unlock the door for any other reason, and especially to do so when there was a chance the guests hadn't given permission and might still be in there, was an action unbecoming of a servant. But Genji had decided. If the only problem had been that his knock hadn't received a reply, he wouldn't have gone this far. But the envelope under the door was doubtlessly one of Kinzo's, or rather, one of the Western envelopes of the Ushimida family head. After last night, the sender of this envelope could be someone other than Kinzo. If this letter had been sent by someone else... Eva-sama, my apologies. Yeah, they could just be taking a bath. Got the bathroom door shut. My apologies, I'll meet to enter your room. After giving that final notice, Genji stuck one of the keys from the bundle into the keyhole. There was the sound of the door unlocking, and after slowly turning the knob, he slowly started opening the door. Light seeped through the crack of the door. Were they in the room? Or had they forgotten to turn out the lights? Clank. It was the sound of the door chain being pulled tight. The chain had been secured. The chain couldn't be secured from the outside, so it also proved that they were in the room. The sound of voices on the TV seeped out of the room. The lights, the chain, and the TV. All of these things made it clear that they were in the room, but there was no sign of them. Genji called out to Eva once again through the crack of the door, but there was no answer. Genji-sama, what should we do? As part of their job, the servants were able to unlock almost any lock in the mansion, but they had no way to open a door with a chain. The only way to get by the chain was to cut it. That was certainly not permitted as part of the servants' usual work. A creepy chill had already rushed up their backs. Kanan held his breath again and tried to send someone through the door, but even so, he was not able to sense anyone. I will call Madam in return. Kanan, cut the chain. Yes. As Kenan hurried away to get a cutting tool, Genji called him to a stop. Wait, Kenan. Return to the kitchen and take Kumasawa with you. You must not act alone. Yes, certainly. It looked like Kenan was wondering why he had to do something so troublesome in the middle of this urgent situation. But Genji had said out of wariness. He didn't care what happened to himself, but in the worst case scenario, he didn't want anything to happen to Kenan. In the kitchen, Kumasawa was piling food in the serving cart. Nanjo was waiting for Genji, apparently wanting to show him a move he'd finally thought up that might turn the tables on him. But Genji's appearance immediately told him that something was wrong. Oh, what has happened, Genji-san? Yeah, it would definitely make more sense to stay at the door. Also, he should be going back to the kitchen as well, like with Kenan, so he's not alone at any point. Not just for his sake, but so he has an alibi. Everyone needs to have an alibi. Also, I didn't realize I can't move the camera. Oh, what's happened, Genji-san? Dr. Nanjo, my apologies, but please allow this match to be suspended for the time being. Go ahead and take care of the chain. Kumasawa, stop setting up dinner for now and accompany Kenan. Oh, so he did go with him. Never mind. I will go over to Madam. If you would come with me, Dr. Nanjo. Has something happened? Genji took Nanjo, who still didn't know what was going on, and quickly left the kitchen. Kumasawa-san, my apologies, but please come with me. What has happened, Kenan-san? Kumasawa said almost exactly the same thing as Nanjo, only able to take in the situation, and chased after Kenan, who had flown out into the hallway. Taking Kumasawa with him, Kenan went to a storage room and looked through the tools packed in toolboxes and hanging over the walls, trying to find something that could be used to cut the chain. What are you looking for? Let me help too. We're cutting a door chain. Where was that large wire cutter? A door chain? Why would you do something like that? The chain to Ever-sama and Hideyoshi-sama's room. Even though they should be inside, they didn't answer when we called them. It took Kumasawa some time to figure out how cutting the chain, and Eva and Hideyoshi not answering were connected, but she did realize that this was an urgent situation. That one will probably do the trick. Kenan took down a very large wire cutter that had been hanging in the wall. It was called a cutter, but maybe it'd be easier to understand if we said it was shaped like a large pair of pliers. Kenan remembered once being warned that this dangerous tool could easily cut through one of your fingers. Possibly, Calton increased. We're about to find out. Kenan took that and rushed up the stairs. He already knew instinctively. He should play for every minute, every second to open it quickly. Or perhaps it was already... Please wait, Kenan-san. Hurry. Kumasawa eventually caught up with him, gasping for breath with both hands on her knees. When Kenan changed his grip on the wire cutters and looked up at the door, let out an struck speechless. When did this possibly happen? What is this? Eep. Kumasawa screamed weakly, her face pallid. That was no surprise, because right there, on the door, just like the magic circle that had been drawn on the shutter of the Rose Garden storehouse, there was another eerie shape drawn with a blood-like paint. However, it would be odd to call this one a magic circle, because, unlike what most people would expect, it wasn't a circle with shapes drawn inside it, but a slightly more complicated geometrical shape. However, those strange characters filling in the gaps, which weren't from the alphabet, were the same kind as the ones on the magic circle on the shutter. But the thing that had Kenan struck speechless wasn't how eerie the magic circle was. It was that something like this hadn't been here a short while ago. First, he'd taken a trip back to the kitchen. After that, he'd gone to the storage room to grab a tool and headed right back. Put those together and it couldn't have been more than 5 minutes. How could someone add something this creepy during that period of time? And as though it had just been drawn, almost like the door itself was bleeding, several unsettling vertical red lines slowly dripped down, getting longer and longer. Eep, eek! Kumasawa's knees gave way and she sank down on the spot. If Kumasawa hadn't done this first, then Kenan surely would have wanted to. Beatrice-sama. Eek! It's the work of Beatrice-sama. How horrid, how horrid. Kenan gulped, then readied the wire cutter and approached the door. He didn't want to get close to this disturbing magic circle, and he really didn't want to touch the steadily dripping substance that looked like blood. But if he didn't get close, he wouldn't be able to cut the chain. Fighting this cold feeling, he gulped again, and after gathering his courage, he went even closer, putting the wire cutter up against the chain. He then pressed with all his strength, managing to cut through the chain far more easily than he'd expected. The cut chain fell into 2 separate parts, which continued to decline as they swayed back and forth. Kenan-san, there's an envelope by your feet. Isn't that the master's? It looked like Kumasawa had also noticed the western envelope at the bottom of the door, and that the sealing wax had been sealed with Head's ring. Kenan hesitated for just a second over whether he should open the letter first or check inside the room, but he eventually decided on fulfilling his original purpose, and pulled a handkerchief out of his pocket. This was so he wouldn't leave fingerprints on the door. If his worst fears were realized, the police would want to investigate this room too. He slowly pushed the door open. He was able to move he was able to more clearly hear the sound of the television, which had been seeping out faintly this whole time. Eva-san? Eva was lying face up on the bed with her shoes still on. Kurosawa, who had fearfully entered after Kanan, who was hiding behind his back, screamed a short eek again when she saw Eva like that. Eva's shoes had been the first part of her that Kanan had seen, so the oddness of wearing shoes in bed was the first thing to strike him. But when Eva's head shifted and he was lying upside, Ken couldn't help but let out a short scream like Kurosawa. Right in the middle of Eva's forehead, something had been placed. Something was growing there? No. Right in the center of her forehead. Was it an old-fashioned knife? That or some weapon like it was sticking out. At the base where it was stuck in, blood dripped down, staining the sheets on the other side bright red. Kurosawa's knees gave way once more, and she sank down on the floor. Her mouth kept flopping open and closed, but she couldn't even scream. Eva was dead, with some kind of weapon sticking out of her forehead. Stai hakken! Stai hakken! Both eyes were open wide, and the image of the person who killed her must have been burned into them, but the only mouth capable of naming that person had been shut for all eternity. Even though her forehead was the last place they wanted to look, they couldn't tear their eyes from it. Right there, the weapon was stuck into Eva's forehead, standing almost perfectly upright, and on the handle was a complicated design that you wouldn't expect to see on an ordinary weapon. That thing could be summed up with the word occult. It was a vulgar object, a design that might have been some demon. What about Hideyoshi-sama? Hideyoshi-sama. Eva was on top of her bed, but the other bed was empty. Where was Hideyoshi? Everyone always asks where was Hideyoshi, but they never ask how was Hideyoshi. We'll find out both. After taking a backwards glance at Kurosawa, still on her knees and stupefied, he checked the bathroom just in case. At the moment he opened the door, he was greeted by steam and the sound of the shower. The bathroom was of the same familiar style as most hotel bathrooms. When taking a shower, a waterproof curtain was used to keep water from flying out. That waterproof curtain was half open, and lying tumbled down in the bathtub was Hideyoshi, completely naked with both eyes open, and pointing right at Kanan. Just like Eva, a weapon with a demon-like design was stuck into his forehead. Since his head had been under the shower's hot water this whole time, his face wasn't half covered and filthy with blood like Eva's had been. The sight of him dead while still taking a shower was tragic enough. Okay, there. Umineko found on the bed of a guest room inside the mansion with a weapon resembling an ice pick sticking out of her forehead. Umineko Hideyoshi went to the bathroom of the same guest room that Eva was found in. Like Eva, there was a weapon resembling an ice pick sticking out of his forehead. You can't see either of them by looking through the gap of the door where the chain is set. You can't see them, so you can't reach them. Hey, how could a human possibly kill them? Hehehehehe. Just then, they heard Natsui's voice coming from the hall. She was probably coming with Genji. Again with his graffiti. What about this letter? What does it say inside? I don't know. I haven't read it yet. We shouldn't touch it carelessly. The culprit's fingerprints might be left on it. We should hand it over to the police. They went out of their way to leave it here. I'm sure they wouldn't have left fingerprints. As Natsui said that she picked up the envelope, and before checking its contents, she entered the room herself, where she found Eva, dead. Yeah, Eva-san. It's actually a rifle, but yeah. That looks like a shotgun though, doesn't it? Madam, Hideyoshi-sama is here too. Yeah, this is truly atrocious. Kinda turn off the shower. Don't let this be any more pitiful than it needs to be. Yes, ma'am. Kinda gripped his handkerchief and twisted the valve, turning off the shower. In the bathtub, a small jar of body soap had fallen with the cap off. It really looked like he'd been attacked while taking a shower. There was still a small splash of blood clinging to the white bathtub, and a combination of red and white made a horrible contrast. Dr. Nanjo, I understand. No signs of post-mortem lividity. Rigor mortis hasn't begun either. It would seem that an hour or so has passed since they were killed. But even so, how a weapon with such a short handle could do that to the skull, I cannot imagine. Nanjo checked their pulse and their pupils, making certain of their deaths once more. As Kanan watched this business-like treatment, he thought, couldn't you tell at a glance that they're dead without doing all that? Nanjo thought about removing the weapon, but then decided it'd be better to preserve the scene and hand it over to the police, so he left it alone. A close inspection of the base showed that it didn't have a blade. In fact, it was more conical than blade-shaped. He noticed that, rather than a knife, it was more like a short-handled spear, something with a shape better suited for thrusting than slicing. Some people might have likened it to a thick ice pick, rather than a short spear. We typically call these stakes in Umineko. Remember, we can't contact the police for real. The radio isn't working. So the soonest we can contact them is when the boat shows up tomorrow at about 9 AM with whatever communications device is on the boat. At any rate, after looking at the scene, no further words were needed to describe what sort of terrible purpose such easily designed weapons were initially made for. Nor was it necessary to explain how they carried out their function. Natsu, hoping to escape the repulsive steam filling the bathroom as soon as she could, covered her mouth with a handkerchief and dashed from the room. Just viewing the gruesome bodies for an instant had been enough to burn the image into her eyes. If she looked any longer, that image would surely remain in her vision for all eternity. The rising urge to vomit was attacked with the same feeling she'd had that morning at the gardening storehouse. For a while, Natsu couldn't help but stand with her back facing the guest room, putting that sickness in her stomach. At any rate, we can't let George see this room. Seal this room with all haste. Yes, we mustn't let them see. If George then saw his parents in this brutal state, they could tell that those fiercely racing footsteps in the hallway belonged to George, even before he came dashing into the room. George and the other children had been waiting in the parlor. However, when they saw Genji speak to Natsuhi, when they saw her turn pale and fly out of the parlor, they'd felt a sense of foreboding. And when they saw a large group of people gathered around the guest room, they were sure of it. Father, Mother. What is this? Another magic circle? Tell us all about it, Maria. Aunt Ava and Uncle Hideyoshi are safe, right? What's the name of the OST that's playing right now? I don't know. I would have to check. I only know a few songs by name. Umineko has a huge OST, though. Why is this used in Human Spirit Agency? Hey, Kana-kun, what's this all about? Valor-sama. Hell, Kana didn't have to say anything. You would just scream. Golden Slaughter. I think it's Golden Slaughterer, not Golden Slaughter, but yeah. I recognize that name. Golden Slaughterer sounds right. Kana didn't have to say anything. George just screamed after he ran into the room, told them everything they needed to know. Wow. Who did this? I'll kill you, I'll kill you. George couldn't. Hang in there. Natsu touched George's shoulder with her hand, but he violently shook her off. George fell beside Ava and buried his face in the bed in front of his mother's face, wailing. Then he pounded on the bed with his fist over and over again. George Nissan, hang in there. Huh? Battler? Battler-sama? Battler had his back against the wall of the hallway. He was covering his eyes with his white hand and weeping without restraint. Horrible. That's horrible. He proposed to the girl he loved and lost her the next day. And the same day, even his mom and dad were killed. Isn't that too harsh? Of course, it's sad whenever anyone dies, no matter who it is. But to Battler, those left alone by the deaths of others, were far more worthy of pity. Everyone here now had lost someone close to them. George wasn't the only one to be pitied. However, George's pain was far greater than anyone else's. Battler. I know, everyone dies sooner or later. If you're human, you'll eventually have to fight the sorrow of losing someone close to you. But still, shouldn't that day be far in the future for Hanaki? And shouldn't those deaths be one at a time? Horrible. It's too horrible. That bastard. Doesn't he have even a speck of human sympathy in him? Ah. Ooh, Battler, don't cry. Mario tried to comfort Battler in a mechanical sounding voice. Battler violently wiped his tears. Yeah, damn it, I won't cry anymore. Tears of regret, tears of sadness, I won't shed them again. When the Battler cries, it's all useless. The witch has got me backed into a corner. I'm always on the defensive. And that's useless, it's all useless. I'll spin the chessboard around. That bastard probably thinks we'll be running scared like sheep until tomorrow before we try anything. But guess what, I'll spin it around. That bastard can't escape the sound until tomorrow either. We won't be hiding away pissing ourselves, that bastard will. I'll expose you, you'll see. By tomorrow. No, screw tomorrow. Tonight. Before tonight's over, I'll be gripping you by the collar. I hope for his sake he's right. I hope for everyone's sake he's right. Let's go a bit further until we get to read the letter. At any rate, we'll lock this room and leave everything as it is until the police come. No objections, I take it? Natsu announced it as though she didn't care whether they agreed or not. If anyone had a right to object, it would have been George, but he looked as though he shed enough tears. George nodded slightly, still facing away from the others, and when he stood up, everyone else agreed too. Natsu stood and opened the western envelope the family had that she'd picked up. But now that they decided to leave this room, she decided to unseal it in the parlor where everyone could watch. As soon as they walked out into the hallway to head back to the parlor, some of them immediately felt something out of place, or maybe sensed something strange. And Battler did request that Beatrice make a scene that only a witch could pull off. So it stands to reason she will listen and make an impossible scene to prove that she exists. Go ahead, try to think of a way. Start thinking of potential holes. Start thinking, is there any way a human could have done this? Is there any sort of potential way? With the info that we have. Ooh, stinks. Did you notice it too, Mario? Seriously, what's that smell? It's awful. When everyone sniffed the air, they did notice a horrible burnt smell drifting through the hallway. One that none of them had smelled until then. I'll go quickly to check the kitchen. I'm sure I turned the flame off. After noticing a burnt smell, it was natural that Kumasawa, who had just been using the burner in the kitchen, suspected that her own slip-up had caused it. Kumasawa hastily dashed away. Kanon, go with Kumasawa. Do not let her be alone. Yes. After nodding at Genji's order, Kanon followed after her. He wasn't running, but as he followed her, he tried to search for the cause of the smell in other directions as well. Ooh, stinks. Ooh. It truly is a stench that makes the nose wrinkle. However, that doesn't mean we can just open a window for ventilation. Natsuhi was reluctant to open the windows in a situation where self-defense was so important. Let us run the fan. I do not believe there will be any need to open the windows. George Anaki, is it okay if I talk to you? If it's about finding the culprit, then I have no problems. It seemed that George had managed to climb out of the abyss of sorrow. All that filled his chest now was the quiet flame of hatred towards the culprit who had stolen the lives of the one he loved and his beloved parents. The chain for this room was set. From what I could tell by looking at it, I'm positive that it couldn't have been opened from the outside. In other words, this was a perfect closed room. That does seem to be the case. In the case of the Rose Garden storehouse, they might have sneaked the shutter's key out of the servant room. Or maybe they had a duplicate key. I can imagine many ways they could have done it. But this chain is different. Among generally used locking techniques, a chain is the simplest one to create a closed room with. Only a chain will block everything coming from the outside as long as it isn't physically broken. So does this mean the culprit couldn't have gone in or out through the door? That's interesting. Just a few hours ago, I seem to remember everyone making a fuss over how to enter a room without using the door. Back then, we were all losing our cool, wondering how grandfather disappeared from his room. The receipt Ante was stuck in the door on a whim proved that the door had remained sealed, and since Aunt Natsu was the only person to enter or exit during that time, she was under suspicion. Aunt Ava proposed a theory about how Aunt Natsu might have thrown grandfather out the window and left by the door herself. But this door was much simpler. It was sealed from the inside with a door chain. The window had also been locked from the inside, and the bodies had been inside the room. This time it really had been, without exaggeration, a true closed room. That's right. If you include grandfather's disappearance, 3 cases have occurred, and all 3 times the door has been the point of interest. The first was the shutter. There was a key in the servant room, and if we assume someone knew about that, this can't really be called a closed room. The next was the door sealed by the receipt. However, Aunt Natsu entered that room, so if grandfather had left through the window or had been thrown out, she would have been able to lock the window before escaping. Or like my theory, grandfather could have hidden until the receipt was gone and left the room later. Basically, this door can be defeated with a handful of desperate tricks. In that case, you can't really call this one a closed room either. But this time, what about this time? And now we have the door sealed with the door chain. Finally, we have to give up. The window, the door, everything had been locked. It was a perfect closed room. The first hadn't been a closed room because everyone could be suspected. The second hadn't been a closed room because Aunt Natsu could be suspected. But this time no one can be suspected. This was a perfect closed room because the door chain formed a seal that blocked everyone equally well. In that case, did the culprit carry out the crime without entering the room? Was this some method from outside the room? Good point. Even though the chain makes it impossible to open it wide enough for a person to get through, you can open it a small crack. Did the culprit knock at the door to make them peer out before attacking them? Wait, am I missing something? Yeah, you are. If Aunt Ava's body had been lying right next to the door, then it might have been possible. We're just narrowing out obvious possibilities now. But she was on the bed at the back of the room, and Uncle Hideyoshi was even in the bathroom. Looking from the crack of the door, you couldn't even see them, and you couldn't reach them with your hands either. Damn it, it's all useless, I don't have a clue. Something was tugging softly at my sleeve. It was Maria. Ooh, satisfied? What do you mean, satisfied? Hehehehe. Battler, since you didn't want to suspect any of your relatives, you made a wish, saying you wanted the culprit to be Beatrice, right? Well, Beatrice granted that wish. Just as you asked, she did something that was completely impossible for a human to make you believe in the witch. And now you're complaining? How selfish. Well, I would assume they probably killed Ava first, because Hideyoshi was in the shower, so it was harder for him to hear. So they probably somehow... It seems like Ava was probably sleeping in the bed, right? She was napping, so they killed her while she was asleep so she didn't make noise. Then they went in and killed Hideyoshi, who couldn't hear anything, and would have not heard much anyway. Obviously, this is not even talking about like where they were, how they got in or out, or whatever. Let's just say, someone killed them, you know. Then they killed Hideyoshi, then somehow left. The rest isn't clear. And now you're complaining? How selfish. Eyes are open. Are you waking? Maybe. Maybe she woke up. Maybe she opened her eyes right before she got stabbed. I don't know. Maybe they said like, hi, then plunged it. You can't deny that kind of possibility, right? How selfish. Hee 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 hee. Ouch. I tapped Moria, who was laughing unpleasantly, on the head with my fist. One of those. Sure, thanks for granting that wish. That just now was to thank you, and also to teach you to stop laughing when it's inappropriate. More importantly, tell me, there was another mysterious scribble on the door to Aunt Ava in Uncle Hideyoshi's room. Was that another magic circle? Hee hee hee. That one had a really memorable and characteristic design, so I'd hoped you'd at least know what it was. Shut up. That's like me approaching a stranger and saying, like, oh, you don't recognize this really memorable and recognizable Toho song? What, you don't know Desire Drive? You don't know You and Owen Was Her? Uncivilized, uncultured swine! I don't know, which is why I'm letting you take the credit. Quit whining and explain. You sure are a violent battler. I won't tell you if you're too mean, get it? Ouch. Ooh, I'll say it, stop hitting me. That's the first magic circle of the moon. What does it mean? What is this magic circle's effect? What does the Hebrew writing mean? The words are from the Old Testament, Psalms 107 verse 16. For he has broken gates of brass and cut through bars of iron. This magic circle has two effects. First, it can open a door regardless of which method has been used to lock it. That sure is convenient. They're saying they're trying to make it look like they're a witch because this closed room has a door that can't be opened without relying on magic. And the other effect? When you're blocked by unopenable doors in all directions, it opens a door. By using it in a typical situation, it gives you a solution you hadn't even thought of until then. Generally speaking, you receive the powers of observation and discernment, inspiration and intuition. Hehehe. Plus 2 to int. Beatrice is trying to provoke you, since there's no way lowly humans like Battler could figure out how this door was opened. Hehehe. Ouch. Okay, good work, so shut up. Sounds great, I'll accept this challenge from the witch. Maria-chan, things like witches and demons don't exist in this world. Wow, he's actually just refuting Maria now. He's not playing along anymore. He's had enough. His whole family's dead. His whole immediate family. Someone killed father and mother. I don't know whether that was someone I know or not. But either way, it was definitely a human. Yeah, but how? How did they reach those two through the crack in the door? It couldn't have been more than 10 centimeters wide. At any rate, I can hardly stand this stench. What in the world could it be? Open up the damn envelope. Kanen and Kumasawa, who had gone on ahead, realized the smell wasn't coming from the kitchen even before they arrived there. That was because they noticed an even thicker wave of stench rising up the stairs leading to the basement, which they passed on the way to the kitchen. The boiler room. I wonder if there's something wrong with the boiler again. The stairs led to the underground boiler room. The mansion's boiler was old and in poor condition. Both of them had witnessed problems with the boiler on several occasions, but they never smelled the boiler belching out a stench like this before. Sorry, anyone who wants me to wrap up, because there's still a bit more time to go, it seems. What was that sound? I always forget like the order of events with this kind of stuff. The thing they heard from the basement was definitely the sound of a door closing. Kumasawa had phrased it as a question, but she already knew it couldn't be anything else. Kumasawa was so surprised at the sound that her knees gave way yet again, and she cowered. After all, at that very moment, no one could have been in the boiler room. Just a few seconds ago, everyone had been crowded together around Ava and Hideyoshi's room. So who caused the sound of a door closing just now? Kind of sound. After taking a second to sort out the situation, Kennen ran towards the basement. Since they'd heard the sound of a door closing just now, and there was no sign of anyone coming up the stairs, that person who closed the door had to be inside the boiler room now. If the boiler room had been a dead end, Kennen wouldn't have rushed in so hastily. But Kennen was a servant, so he knew. There were two entrances to the boiler room, one that opened to the mansion, and one that opened to the courtyard. If he didn't chase them now, they might slip away. Kumasawa reached the same conclusion long after Kennen did, but she couldn't let him go alone. If the thing in the boiler room was the culprit, an opponent who had easily killed 6 adults at the first murder, then no matter how Kennen confronted them, he wouldn't be a match. Of course, with this argument, even if Kubo-sama joined him, it wouldn't change anything. At any rate, after a delay, Kubo-sama decided that she mustn't let Kanon go alone, and she rushed down the stairs. What will happen? At that time, Kanon was already in the boiler room. The boiler room's characteristic damp heat tormented him. It had always been an unpleasantly smelly and hot place. And on top of that, the room was full of that horrible stench, which made Kanon feel like he was going to be sick. There was no doubt that this room was the source. In that case, Kanon should have been searching for where the smell was coming from. However, Kanon kept gazing straight forward as he grabbed the hatchet from a tool shelf just off to the side of the door. He hadn't stretched out his hand because he'd wanted a hatchet. He'd wanted to grab a weapon. Any weapon. Why? Kanon gazed into the darkness where the naked light bulb couldn't pierce. Then he answered. In roulette, you bet on a number or the colors red or black, vying for a payoff. However, low-risk bets like black and red only offer a similarly low payoff. The words coming from Kanon's mouth were swallowed up by the darkness. That darkness suddenly started to swirl, glittering. Here we go. I think that CG is higher resolution, like, not higher resolution, but like redone for this, because those definitely didn't used to look like that in the old version. It was such a fantastical scene. Golden sparkling butterflies that hid in the shadows all over the boiler room, clapped their wings, twinkling beautifully, and gathered in the darkness, disappearing. So we're actually seeing some magic here. This is interesting. Kanon continued speaking, directing his words at the darkness as it swallowed the butterflies up. As the magic gathered in... as the butterflies gathered in the darkness, they perhaps, probably, no, they would certainly laugh. But Kanon continued to speak without faltering in the slightest. However, if you bet on something with a lower probability, your payoff exists. I need to breathe for a second, God. I talk too much. Your payoff increases proportional to the risk. The master called succeeding despite an astronomical risk a miracle, and call the astronomical payoff gained as a result magic. I have no interest in what kind of magic you and the master were seeking when you spun that roulette. But you forgot something. You forgot that in roulette, there's a pocket that is neither black nor red. Roulette has a special pocket called zero, which means that the house takes everything in certain variants of the game. This means that all of the coins bet on the table will be swept up, just as though everyone has forfeit. I set my heart on just one thing. I decided that if Shannon were to be killed and I was left alive, I'd sacrifice this life of mine and bring this roulette of yours to ruin. This isn't one of the master's rules, and it certainly isn't one of yours. I made this rule myself. I'm not furniture anymore. I'm the zero on your roulette. Kanon's face twisted with humiliation. It was clear that his defiance against his own weaknesses was being ridiculed somehow. Kanon's brow creased even further, and a fierce expression that he'd never shown to anyone appeared on his face. The hand grasping the hatchet was shaking. His sweat became drops, which slid downward. It was clear that the emotion causing Kanon's hand to shake wasn't just anger. However, Kanon suppressed that emotion. I won't let your words lead me astray again. This is where the demon's roulette ends. Wait another 1,000 years in hell for your next summoner, Beatrice. When Kanon raised the hatchet and tried to dive into the darkness definitely sneered. It sneered at that courage as if it were vulgar, lazy, futile, and meaningless. That's a sound we'll be hearing a lot, both of those. That wave. Kanon, his hatchet still held aloft, couldn't take another step after that. With a clang, the hatchet that he'd been grasping fell and rolled on the floor. And following that, with a pair of thuds, Kanon's knees hit, left then right. That hand, which looked like it was trying to catch the sky, now that the hatchet had been dropped, gradually lowered, landing on his chest. Then the other hand did the same. Oh no, I don't feel so good. Right there was a handle with a demonic design engraved in it. As Kanon looked down at his chest, the same type of weapon that had been stabbed into Eva and Hideyoshi's foreheads was... Kanon was curled up in anguish, fresh blood dribbling from the corner of his mouth. It was makeup, too extreme for Kanon's white skin. Around this scene, the glittering gold butterflies danced through the darkness, mesmerizing. It was a beautiful, beautiful dance, a funeral march of tribute, ridicule, and contempt for a single boy's self-sacrifice. Kanon had already been prepared for his own death. But although he could do nothing but accept the death he'd received, he attempted one last measure of resistance. He grasped the handle, the weapon sticking to his chest with both hands, gritting his teeth in acute and unearthly pain. He pulled it out. For only a moment, a bright red spray gushed out. It made an unpleasant bloop sound. It probably resembled the sound of Cannon's soul as it was sucked into the swamp of the dead. Cannon-san? Eek! So someone... Eek! Kumasawa screamed at the incomprehensible sight in front of her. Cannon was lying in a pool of blood. Kumasawa's heart was a complete mess. Ah, what a horrible fate. He wouldn't have been killed if I'd been with him. Ah, what incredible luck. If I'd been with him, I might have been killed too. As she screamed, her expression was filled with complete confusion, and all the muscles of her face were pulled up, almost as though she was smiling while crying. But no one could have made fun of an expression like this. What is it, Kumasawa? Answer me, Kumasawa. The first one I dashed in was Natsuki, holding the rifle. Battler and Genji dashed in after her. Normally, they probably would have started discussing the origin of that violent stench filling the boiler room. But after they saw Cannon, who was lying on the ground as if he were drowning in an ocean of his own blood, the stench wasn't important anymore. Cannon, answer me. Genji, bring Dr. Nanjo here. Dr. Nanjo is getting real overtime. Natsuki realized that even though Cannon was on the verge of death, he was still conscious, so she sent Genji to get the doctor. Natsuki, holding the rifle aloft, faced the darkness in the center of the boiler room and shouted, "Who's hiding over there? Come out quietly. If you don't come out from there, I'll shoot without mercy. We need light. Natsuki, let's light them up." Battler, thinking quickly, took a large flashlight from the tool shelf alongside the door, and used its light to cut through the darkness Natsuki was glaring into. But the light only shone a mechanical-looking piping and a door. The door had been lifted open a small crack, and it was obvious that someone had left through there in a hurry. Natsuki, where does that door go? Hey, Genji, what does that door lead to? The courtyard. Like hell, I'd let you get away, you damn bastard. Battler let out a war cry as he slammed into the door. Fleur from outside suddenly rushed in. There were some thin, rough stairs leading up. Battler ran up them shouting, "Wait, Battler-kun, it's dangerous to be on your own right now." Natsuki was also rushing up the stairs, chasing after Battler. They were in the courtyard. The courtyard of the mansion had been built strictly for lighting purposes, so it wasn't a very elegant place, because it was surrounded on all sides. The air was calm and completely undisturbed, even though they could hear the sound of strong winds. There was only the gentle, sorrowful rain. As he ran through the cold and scattered raindrops, dashing up the stairs into the courtyard, Battler looked in every direction. Of course, the odds of him finding a suspicious silhouette standing around nonchalantly were pretty much zero. He spun, looking all around. He turned again and again. He kept spinning until he almost lost his sense of direction. He prayed that he would see the culprit somewhere in the scenery. There was no chance. All he saw as he spun was more and more of this mansion's heartless walls and windows. Furthermore, there were two entrances into the mansion from the courtyard, and neither of them were locked. It was because the courtyard couldn't be entered from outside the mansion. The doors had been built without locks. He didn't know which one they'd left through. He had to give up. Battler pounded the wall with his fist, swearing. Maybe you could check and see which one has, like, wet footprints inside. Maybe. Battler-kun, you mustn't run ahead by yourself. Battler-kun? Battler pressed his sword against the wall, which he scratched at with his fingernails as he cried. Damn it, damn it, damn it. Antei and Uncle Hideyoshi, and now Cannon-kun. You killed a full 6 people. That wasn't enough, so you had to kill 3 more? Are you kidding me? Are you fucking kidding me? Antei and Uncle Hideyoshi were always kind and fun. I just met Cannon yesterday, but I'm sure I'd have gotten along fine with him. Why did you kill them? Why? You know, when people die, they don't come back to life again, right? They're gonna quickly sprout up again like bamboo shoots. Why'd you kill them? Why? Ugh. Battler was a boy who could understand the feelings of pain and regret in a person's heart. So he cried, with all his strength. Natsuki, who had always thought of Battler as a frank person, was a little surprised to find he had this delicate side, and at the same time, she understood how easily the heart of a young person could be. How easily hurt the heart of a young person could be, so she held him. It's alright. Rifle in one hand, nephew in another. I'll definitely protect you, George-kun, Mori-chan, and Jessica. As a mother, and as the representative of the Ushimura family. Yeah, Battler, after sobbing in Natsuki's chest for a while, wiped his tears with a bitter smile, as though he had been like that the whole time, and tried to appear as though he'd cried more than enough already. Anyway, let's go back down for now. Protecting ourselves is a higher priority than finding the culprit. Tomorrow the boat will arrive. After that happens, the police will come, and everything should be brought to light. There is no way the culprit can escape this island, no matter how much they struggle. That's right. When the police come, when the seagulls cry, the crime will be solved. But, for some reason, Battler felt a slight sense of uneasiness, as if the seagulls would never cry again. That couldn't be true. The typhoon passes. Surely the lively seagulls will return to the harbor again. Surely. If we say something happens, it'll happen. Definitely increases the odds. I returned to the boiler room along with Aunt Nazi and told everyone weekly that we hadn't found anything. We heard that Dr. Nanzo and Dorjaniki had carried Kanekun to the servant room. The servant room had a first aid kit and a sink, and could apparently function as a nurse's office. Musawa-san and Jessica had accompanied them. Stains from Kanekun's blood remained on the floor. Judging by the large amount of blood lost and the ruthless shape of the weapon that had fallen carelessly to the ground, I figured that Dr. Nanzo's treatment would probably end in vain. That weapon was doubtlessly the same type that had been stuck in Aunt Eva and Uncle Hideyoshi's foreheads. But wait, isn't the mnemonic design on the handle a little different? There seemed to be some small differences in that part. Still, as far as the overall shape was concerned, the weapons were all the same type. Though it seemed brutal, we had left the weapon stuck in Aunt Eva and Uncle Hideyoshi to preserve the crime scene. So this was the first time we were able to have a perfect view of the entire weapon. As we'd expected, the weapon was not bladed like a knife, but shaped like an ice pick. Rather, a thin stake, and it had a spiral-shaped pattern, sort of like a drill. It looked like something that might be driven into the hearts of human sacrifices in some demonic ritual. Including the handle, it was 25 centimeters long. Half of that was the stake-shaped part, which was stained with deep red blood. The length of the blood-stained part made it clear just how deeply it must have penetrated into Kanekun's chest. But Aunt Natsu and the rest didn't even look at the weapon. Instead, it stood in front of the incinerator, where the horrible stench was emanating from. They must have dragged out that thing which had been burning in the furnace. It was still smoldering and sending out dense waves of that awfully unpleasant smell. Genji-san and Morris stared down at it. Aunt Natsu probably couldn't stand to look directly at it. She kept shaking her head, her back to it. Ooh, I thought nothing could surprise me after everything that's happened. But this is... I stood there for a while, moaning, with a rising urge to vomit. The true source of that unearthly stench was a scorched corpse that had been cooking inside the incinerator. The clothes, the surface of the body, and the hair were all hideously burned. That grotesque corpse was in a state where not the face, nor the age, nor even the gender could be guessed at. But when I thought about it calmly, I realized that a corpse appearing at this time could only be one person. It was grandfather, who had disappeared that morning, and whose whereabouts had been unknown. I believe it is most likely the master. I agree. That he would pass away in such a state. It's heartrending. But is there any proof that this corpse really is grandfather? It's burnt so black you can't tell what sex it is. Valor couldn't. Look at the feet. Look at the feet. Natsui, with her handkerchief over the mouth and her eyes averted, pointed and told me to look at the burnt corpse's feet. Notice how there are 6 toes on each foot. Huh? Ah, you're right. Just as Genji-san had said, there were 6 toes on each foot. Each individual toe looked so normal in its line that I hadn't noticed. The master was born with 6 toes on both of his feet. Consequently, their master was entrusted with the revival of the Yoshimura family. I've heard that since long ago, cases of polydactyly were common in the Yoshimura family. It's probably hereditary. And polydactyly literally means many fingers. Because of a little mistake by God, when the person is born, one of their toes or fingers splits in 2 and the total number increases. But a big deal isn't usually made of polydactyly in the world at large. That's because it isn't a disease, just something people are born with. So while they're still babies, at about the time they turn 1 year old, they can be taken to the hospital and given surgery to make them normal. Even a child with polydactyly can be treated before they become aware, so they might not even remember themselves. By the way, it seems there's a possibility for this to occur in 1 out of every 2,000 babies. So even though it's not usually seen, it isn't that rare at all. Speaking of which, I think Uncle Hideyoshi mentioned something to me long ago. Something about how even Toyotomi Hideyoshi, the man who unified Japan at the end of the Sengoku period, had 6 fingers in one hand. According to Aunt Natsu, among the many Ushimura family heads, the ones most praised for their wisdom all had polydactyly. Because of that, when grandfather was born, his relatives were all excited at the thought that he might become another wise leader. And when the leading relatives all died in the Great Kanto earthquake, it was apparently argued that grandfather should be the one to restore the family, because of the auspicious son of his birth. If grandfather hadn't disliked his position as the head so much, this 6th toe probably would have been pretty lucky for him. Come to think of it, I've heard about some country where it's believed that people with polydactyly should be treated as gods in reversed. Your phone went dead. I'm wrapping up in a minute anyway. It's going to be a bit for the letter, apparently. I'm just going to do a few more lines, probably. This is beside the point, but it's really common in mystery novels for a corpse to be buried to hide its identity. I guess that in grandfather's case, just toasting wouldn't be enough. And grandfather's body was not simply burnt. It was just like Aunt Eva and Uncle Hideyoshi, and the thing that had been stabbed into Kanenkun's chest. One of those demon's ice picks was stuck into his forehead. The head's ring is not on his finger, so the letter last night was telling the truth. Father would probably be horribly disappointed. Natsuki-san let her head droop and closed her eyes tightly. Read this letter in like 10 lines, otherwise we're stopping. This room had also become a vital crime scene for us to hand over to the police. It was decided that we would leave grandfather's corpse here and lock the room, sealing it. It isn't clear when grandfather's corpse started burning in the incinerator. Since according to Genji, the strength of the flames hadn't been that strong, the body must have started burning a long time ago, so that stench could slowly creep out of the furnace and fill the room bit by bit, eventually pouring out and climbing up the staircase. Putting aside whether he was very well done, wow, that's offensive, grandfather had probably been brought out, killed and burned, even though he had started out locked away in the closed room, created by his auto-lock. There's probably no doubting this. However, according to Genji, the boiler room is usually locked. The possibility that someone outside our group had snuck in and committed the crime was overwhelmingly high, and there was also a good chance that this person was walking around with something like a master key. After all, the doors and windows throughout the mansion had been checked. But despite that, the culprit was able to strut around the mansion freely. A lot of suspicious things. Really weird. Okay. This seems like a good place to stop. Yoshimura Kinzo, burned in the incinerator with a weapon resembling an ice pick sticking out of his forehead. The old sorcerer's wish vanished before it could be granted. He always knew that this was one possible result of his risky gamble. Okay. We got a lot done today. That was 3.5 hours. I plan on doing like 2 hours. I think there's probably enough left of the first episode that it could be finished in another stream, but I'm not sure. And tomorrow I might do JTD either tomorrow or Sunday. I'm not sure which day yet. We'll see. I might try to come back and finish this tomorrow, then do JTDs and stream on Sunday, since that'd be a good stopping point for like Umineko stuff episode 1. That's probably what I'm gonna try. Took you like 20 hours. Yeah, I forget exactly how much is left. I guess we'll see. Let me check something here. Right, no one's going that I can raid. Alright, so I'm gonna wrap up here. I'll be back tomorrow the next day. Goodbye, thank you for coming, and see you soonish.